Chapter 2203. Ji Tianxing had guessed that martial god Tianju was behind Yuan Zhen when he first landed in the empty space. Therefore, when the six-fingered palm appeared, he was sure that martial god Tianju had made a move. Only martial god Tianju could send a giant palm across the empty space to block Su Mo's sword skill. This was something that a martial sage could not do. Ji Tianxing had just broken through to the martial sage realm and could not fight against a martial god. However, he knew that martial god Tianju was still in the Holy Kingdom and could not come to kill him personally. A giant palm across the empty space could only save Yuan Zhen but could not threaten him. Yuan Zhen also understood this point. His expression froze and fear flashed across his eyes. However, he refused to show his fear and sneered confidently, "Ji Tianxing, your arrogance has broken through the sky. After all, you are just a martial sage. Even if you can kill Qin Zheng and the Wangtian city governor, you can't fight against a martial god. Even a martial god realm expert could crush you to death with a single finger. There is only a one-word difference between a martial sage and a martial god. However, you should know the difference in strength better than anyone else." Ji Tianxing knew the difference in strength between the two realms. However, he knew that Yuan Zhen was just putting on a brave front. Since you treat your father like a god, I'd like to see if your father can save your life." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing swung the Heaven Barrier sword and slashed at Yuan Zhen. White Tiger's Sacred Sword. 1,000-meter-long silver-white sword light slashed down from the sky toward Yuan Zhen along with the silhouette of a white tiger as large as a mountain. Before the sword radiance arrived, the terrifying sword essence and killing intent had already enveloped him. Yuan Zhen's expression changed and fear flashed across his eyes. He was severely injured and had no strength to fight back. As long as he was hit by the white tiger's sacred sword, he would definitely die. At this critical moment, he could only place all his hopes on the giant golden palm. Swoosh! The giant golden palm did not disappoint him. It immediately lit up with a bright golden light and slapped the white tiger's sacred sword. Kaboom! The giant palm and the sword radiance collided, and there was a deafening explosion. Golden and silver light shards flew everywhere. The shadow of the white tiger was destroyed, and the 1,000-foot-long starry sword radiance shattered into countless pieces. Of course, the giant golden palm was also cut off by 30%. 2 fingers were cut off and the light became dimmer. A violent shockwave spread out and swept Yuan Zhen flew into the empty space far away. He spat out a mouthful of blood from the impact of the shockwave. His consciousness was blurred, and his injuries worsened. He finally regained consciousness after he was sent hundreds of miles away. He turned his head to look at the void and saw that the giant golden palm was damaged, but it was still blocking Ji Tianxing's attack. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Seeing this, Yuan Zhen immediately made up his mind. Run! The giant golden Ju Tianju's Ju. Ju Tianju's Ju could not Ju's right its. Ju Tianju's Yuan Zhen endured his injuries and took out a palm-sized black boat. He formed a seal with both hands and channeled a vast amount of spiritual energy into the boat. Instantly, the small boat expanded by 1,000 times, turning into a pitch-black flying boat that was 100 meters long. The boat was a special sacred weapon. It was used for traveling and could travel unimpeded in the empty space at an extremely fast speed. Without hesitation, Yuan Zhen got into the flying boat and drove it back, fleeing as fast as a bolt of lightning. In the empty space not far away, Ji Tianxing was still entangled with the giant golden palm. Seeing Yuan Zhen escape, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He wanted to chase after Yuan Zhen and kill him on the spot. However, the giant golden palm stopped him with all its might. Even if the sword radiance cracked it, it would not back down. After all, the giant palm was just a divine skill cast by martial god Tianjue. It was formed by divine power and had no life or consciousness. Even if it collapsed, it would not cause any harm to martial god Tianjue. Green Dragon's Sacred Sword. Sky-breaking sword. Ji Tianqing kept roaring as he used one divine skill after another to attack the giant golden palm with all his might. After a dozen breaths, the giant golden palm finally could not hold on any longer. Crack crack. With a series of crisp cracking sounds, the giant golden palm collapsed and turned into billions of golden fragments that scattered in the empty space. In the end, as Ji Tianqing had mentioned, even martial god Tianjue could not do anything to Qin Nan with his giant palm. Only martial god Tianjue could kill him. After the giant golden palm was destroyed, the empty space returned to its calm and dark state. Ji Tianqing flew away without hesitation toward the star shrouded in golden light. I have fallen out with Yuan Zhen, and even martial god Tianjue has attacked. From now on, I will be at odds with Tianjue Divine Nation. I can't let Yuan Zhen escape. I can't let him go back alive. Ji Tianqing murmured to himself. His face was cold and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He flew toward the world of 5 elements as he searched for Yuan Zhen. However, Yuan Zhen had already escaped far away. Moreover, he used the black flying ship as a cover and did not leave any traces. Ji Tianqing searched for 100 breaths, but still could not find Yuan Zhen. Just as Ji Tianqing sped up, the dark, empty space in front of him suddenly rippled. Swoosh! A gap was torn open in the empty space, and a dazzling golden light shone. The sudden golden light passed through the gap and landed in the empty space in front of Ji Tianqing. After the golden light faded, a tall middle-aged man in a golden robe appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. The tall and burly middle-aged man was covered in a layer of faint golden light and exuded a sacred and domineering aura. His face was cold and dignified. The contours of his face were as sharp as a knife. His long and narrow eyes flashed with a sharp and threatening cold light. The dark golden robe he wore was embroidered with the pattern of 2 dragons and a phoenix. The collar and sleeves were embroidered with stars and clouds. He wore a dark golden crown that was more than a foot tall on his head. It was inlaid with 9 gems of different colors, all exuding a mysterious and vast aura. Most importantly, both of his hands under his wide sleeves had 6 fingers. Seeing the sudden appearance of the golden-robed man, Ji Tianqing immediately stopped in the empty space. His face became solemn. His pupils constricted as he frowned and sized up the golden-robed man. A strange look flashed in his eyes. Tianju? It's him? He actually came to the empty space to kill me? This thought flashed in Ji Tianqing's mind. He immediately tensed up and his eyes were filled with hostility and vigilance. However, after careful observation, he realized that the figure in front of him was not the real body of martial god Tianju. It was a doppelganger of his divine soul. This result made Ji Tianqing secretly heave a sigh of relief. It was good that it was not the real body. Then he still had a chance of survival. At this time, Tianju's doppelganger looked at him with burning eyes and a cold smile appeared on his face. Chapter 2204. The tone of Tianju's avatar was a little strange. At first glance, it sounded like an old friend who had not seen each other for many years and was exchanging pleasantries. There was excitement and disbelief, as well as some emotion. However, Ji Tianqing could feel that Tianju's avatar's tone was condescending and gloating. After all, when he was Kenshin, he had shocked the world and suppressed the 3 great martial gods. Even if martial god Tianju did not accept him, he would not dare to offend him. Now, more than 1,000 years had passed. Kenshin, who was once incomparably glorious, had experienced death and rebirth, becoming a young man who had just broken through to the martial sage realm. Tianju was still a high and mighty martial god, one of the most powerful overlords of the 5 elements world. One could imagine how Tianju was feeling at the moment. Ji Tianqing was well aware of it, but he did not show it on his face. He was still calm and indifferent. He looked at Tianju's avatar and said calmly, "Since you have seen through my identity, there is nothing to say between us. You controlled your avatar to stop me. If you want to catch up with me or mock me, you don't have to do that. You are not my friend, and you are not worthy of catching up with me. You once bowed and bent your knees in front of me, and I have also reached the top of the world. You are not qualified to mock me." Tianju's avatar immediately narrowed his eyes, and the sneer on his face deepened. He looked at Ji Tianxing mockingly and nodded. Not bad, Kenshin is indeed Kenshin. He was still as condescending and arrogant as he was in the past. Yes, back then, you were the best in the world, and I was just a martial god. How could I be qualified to be your friend? Moreover, you have ascended to the upper world and ruled over the 10,000 gods. I am just a small martial god, and I am no different from an ant in your eyes. Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "It's good that you understand." Ha ha ha. Martial god Tianju raised his head and laughed, and his tone was indescribably proud and contemptuous. But don't forget, no matter how glorious and noble you were, it is all in the past. You're only a martial saint now. You can't even be considered an ant. The person that this god once looked up to and revered is now right in front of me. This god can crush him with a single finger. Tell me, isn't this laughable? Wasn't it ironic? Ha ha. Martial god Tianju clasped his hands behind his back and paced back and forth in the void, laughing crazily. Ji Tianxing was expressionless as he looked at him indifferently. He asked, "Back then, I was ranked at the top of the 5 elements world and my might shook the world. However, I didn't stay in this world for long before I ascended and left. Even if I didn't give you any pointers back then, I didn't suppress you, nor did I have any enmity with you. I don't understand. Why do you hate me so much to the point of annihilating me and not even sparing the orthodoxies under my sect?" Martial god Tianju continued to circle around Qin Nan. He paced in the air and said in a deep voice, "If you had really fallen in the past, you would have only left your reputation and glorious achievements. Even if I refuse to accept you, I will still revere you from the bottom of my heart. But not only did you ascend alone after you fell in the upper realm, you were reborn. Do you know how hateful it is? Do you know how envious it is? For tens of thousands of years, all the martial gods were trapped in the 5 elements world. They couldn't escape the 10,000 years limit and could only turn into dried bones and yellow sand. You were the only one who successfully ascended to the upper realm, peeked into the true divine Tao, and became the supreme divine king. This is hateful enough to drive me crazy with jealousy." Ji Tianxing already knew this. He nodded slightly and said, "You didn't want to die. You didn't want to be trapped in the 5 elements world like the previous martial gods and die in the 10,000 years limit. You were ambitious. You only wanted to leave the 5 elements world and ascend to the upper realm. You also wanted to step into the true divine path and become the divine king who could command the galaxy and rule over 10,000 gods. Therefore, you secretly attacked my disciples and destroyed the piece of the pillar of heaven's mountains just to find the mystery of my ascension." Martial god Tianju nodded without hesitation and said coldly, "That's right. You clearly knew the method of ascension, but you were selfish and didn't want to share it. This is the original sin." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a trace of contempt. Martial god Tianju's face was filled with resentment. He continued, "Later, you finally fell. After the news spread, I was also extremely shocked. I even felt pity and sorrow. Because I know that after you die, the method of ascension that you mastered is likely to be lost. It was also because of this reason that I didn't have much hope. When I sent people to search for the mystery of ascension, I didn't destroy the pillar of heaven's mountains. If it wasn't for my mercy, the pillar of heaven's mountains would have been destroyed." Ji Tianxing shook his head and sneered. "No, you didn't destroy the pillar of heaven's mountains not because of your mercy. It was because you still had hope and a trace of fantasy. You always thought that I would leave the mystery of ascension behind and pass it to my disciples or hide it in the pillar of heaven's mountains. Once you destroyed the pillar of heaven's mountains, your hope would be completely destroyed. Martial God Tianju was startled. He glanced at him sharply and sneered, "He. I really can't hide anything from you. I didn't expect you to be the one who understands me the most." Ji Tianxing showed a disdainful expression and said coldly, "How can your ugliness and despicableness escape my eyes?" Martial God Tianju was not angry. He sneered and asked, "Do you know the real reason why I have to kill you even though I have no enmity with you?" Ji Tianxing said indifferently, "Because although I fell, I didn't truly disappear. I was reborn and rose up in an even more monstrous manner. You were mad with jealousy and hatred. You spent your entire life and couldn't even ascend to the upper realm, let alone understand the mystery of life and death and reincarnate. But I had everything as if I was the luckiest person in the world. You were jealous, angry, and unwilling to accept this. Therefore, you wouldn't let me rise up again and you wouldn't sit and watch me return to the peak. You wanted to kill me and take away everything that belonged to me. Not only the way to ascend to the upper realm, but also the mystery of reincarnation." Martial God Tianju heard this and laughed wildly again. "Ha ha ha ha. The one who understands me is Kenshin. That's right. You're absolutely right. The heavens are unfair and cut off my path to ascension. I have to go against the heavens and seize a chance to live. No matter how strong you are, Kenshin, you're just a lucky person under the heavens. Only I, Yuan Tianjue, am the most talented and bold overlord." His deep and vigorous voice reverberated in the void. It was deafening and domineering. However, after Ji Tianxing heard his words, he shook his head and laughed out loud with a heart full of pity. "Ha ha ha ha. Actually, you're not a talented and bold overlord. You're just a narrow-minded and selfish fool. You think your heart is higher than the heavens, but in my eyes, you're just a frog at the bottom of a well, a pitiful worm who feels sorry for himself." Chapter 2205. "What did you say?" Tianju's clone's expression suddenly changed. He stopped sneering and glared at Ji Tianxing angrily. His whole body was wrapped in a layer of raging anger, his eyes were gloomy as ice, and his tone was angry and low. Ji Tianxing was not afraid at all. Instead, he looked at him with even more contempt and said in a sonorous voice, "The heavenly Tao is incomplete, but the divine Tao is infinite. You are trapped in a low-level world, and you are only fighting for fame and fortune your whole life. At most, you can only seek the path of ascension. You complain that the heavenly Tao is unfair, but you don't even understand what the heavenly Tao is. You are just a frog in a well, but you boast that you have the ambition to devour the heavens. Isn't that ridiculous? I once reached the peak of the divine Tao and ruled over thousands of gods. In the morning, I went to the origin star sea, and in the evening, I went to the burial star river. When I was in the mood, I sang with the sun star and raised my cup with the moon star. When I was moved by emotions, I plucked the 18 stars of the heavenly dipper to make a pearl chain and the 36 stars of the earthly fiend to carve a pendant. The heavenly Tao is supreme, the universe is vast, and the mystery of the divine Tao. How can you imagine all of this?" Speaking of the past, Ji Tianxing's clothes fluttered in the wind, and he was in high spirits. His whole body exuded a transcendent aura of a ruler looking down on all living things. Even Tianju's clone was moved. He looked at him quietly, and the corresponding scene in his mind was filled with yearning and longing. However, Ji Tianxing's tone became more and more bleak as he spoke. He finally waved his hand and chuckled self-deprecatingly. "Haha, what's the use of telling you this? Isn't it like talking to a summer bug?" Although he was mocking himself, his eyes were full of pity when he looked at Tianju's clone. That was from the heart and soul, just like a god looking down on mortals and ant. Between the two, from vision, knowledge, life, and soul, they belonged to different levels. Tianju's clone suddenly flew into a rage. He only felt that he had received the greatest and most unforgivable insult in his life. Ji Tianxing, you lowly idiot, you bastard! The current you is the lowliest ant in front of this god. This god is the high and mighty martial god, and you are just a piece of meat on the chopping block, a reptile that this god can crush at will. Ji Tianxing saw that he was about to go crazy, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a cold smile. Haha, is that so? I poked at your sore spot, no wonder you flew into a rage. His tone was very calm, as if nothing had happened. However, the more martial god Tianju acted like this, the more furious he became. He cursed with a ferocious face, "Bastard! No matter how eloquent you are, you will still die today. No matter how glorious you were in the past, you can't change the fact that you're going to die. Didn't you think that you were superior and aloof from worldly affairs? After I kill you, I'll take away your memories, the method of ascension, and the mystery of reincarnation. At that time, this god will also be able to ascend to the higher realms, ascend to the peak of the divine Tao, and become a divine king worshipped by all gods. No, this god will definitely be more outstanding than you. I will be able to compete with the heavenly Tao and hold the billions of stars in my hands." Martial god Tianju's long hair fluttered as he roared loudly. Having said that, he suddenly stretched out his palms and struck out a dazzling golden light toward Ji Tianxing's head. "Everything will belong to me. You can die now." The dazzling golden light that covered the sky suddenly formed hundreds of golden light swords. Terrifying divine power burst out and shrouded Ji Tianxing's body. Ji Tianxing looked up at the sky calmly. His left hand formed a sword art while his right hand waved the burial of heaven sword. He used all his strength to defend himself. Even though he had the memories and knowledge of a divine king, he had regarded martial god Tianju as a frog in a well and a lowly ant. However, he was only a martial sage now. If he could not defend himself against the attack of Tianju's avatar, he would definitely die today. Ancestral swords. Ji Tianxing's face was cold as he shouted. He waved the burial of heaven's sword and pierced out starlight, forming a huge mysterious seal. Suddenly, tens of thousands of starry giant swords condensed in the void in all directions. Swish! Swish! Countless starry swords flew over and danced around him, forming a huge sword array. The circular sword formation was like a ball of light, tightly protecting Ji Tianxing. Bang 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 bang! Over 100 golden swords slashed down, ruthlessly slashing at the starlight sword array, causing a series of loud noises to erupt. The terrifying sound waves spread out in the void, causing ripples to form in the surrounding thousands of miles. The giant golden swords were all shattered, turning into golden light spots that filled the sky and dissipated in the void. The sword formation formed by tens of thousands of starry swords was also shattered, turning into billions of starlight and dissipating. Pfff, Ji Tianxing spat out a mouthful of blood. Clutching the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, he was sent flying backwards. After flying for over 100 miles, he finally came to a stop. His entire body flickered with a golden light that flickered unsteadily. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and his back was hunched as he panted violently. His long hair hung down loosely, covering his pale face. There was a burning pain in his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. His bones and meridians were stiff as if they were frozen, and he could not exert any strength. He slowly raised his head and stared coldly at Tianju's clone. He muttered to himself, "Even though my myriad star sword array is a divine path unique skill, 10 times more exquisite than martial god Tianju's divine skill, with his strength and knowledge, it is impossible for him to comprehend it. After all, I am only a martial saint, and he is a martial god. Even if I used the holy sword body, I could not withstand a divine skill from him and was severely injured on the spot. Hateful, ridiculous! At this time, Ji Tianqing was in a difficult situation, and he was full of helplessness. It was like a master of extraordinary swordsmanship who had lost all his power and became a cripple. He could not even defeat a soldier who had a rudimentary understanding of martial arts. This was the so-called one man can defeat 10 men. It was both sad and lamentable. In the void 100 miles away, Tianju's clone stared coldly at Ji Tianqing and sneered. Kenshin, how do you feel now? This god can end your life with one more move. Even if you have great skills and vast knowledge and experience, you can't even keep your life now. You were boasting shamelessly just now. Isn't it ridiculous? Ji Tianqing's expression was the same as before, still full of contempt and pity. An ant will always be an ant. Even if you are a martial god, you are just a slightly stronger ant. Besides, I have to say something. 1,500 years have passed, but you have not made much progress. Have you lived for such a long time in vain? You are courting death. Tianju's clone was enraged again. He raised his palms and slapped across the void. 2 mountain-sized golden palms, carrying a divine power that could destroy heaven and earth, slapped toward Ji Tianqing. These 2 golden palms were 10 times more powerful than the one that Ji Tianqing had shattered previously. Ji Tianqing was immediately in a desperate situation and was about to lose his life. At this critical moment, he raised his left palm with a determined expression and released a sacred golden flame. God-slaying spear. Martial god Tianju was very clear that the seemingly mysterious white light threads were actually the edges of the folded space. A folded alternate dimension was very complicated and dangerous. Once a martial saint expert fell into it, they would either be sliced into pieces by the edges of the space or be lost within, forever unable to leave. Even a martial god realm expert would not dare to enter the place recklessly. Otherwise, they would still lose their lives. Only Ji Tianqing, with his special identity and the memories and knowledge of an unparalleled divine king, dared to use the folded space to hide. Tianju's clone's gaze passed through the 2 cracks in the void and searched for Ji Tianqing's traces in the folded space. 10 breaths later, the 2 cracks closed automatically, but he did not find Ji Tianqing. Therefore, he used the space-shattering blade again and slashed at the void with his palms. Crack! Another loud explosion was heard, and the void was split into pieces again. Thousands of strands of white light threads appeared, interweaving and folding in the darkness. Tianju's clone's gaze was like lightning as he searched for Ji Tianqing's aura with his mind's sense. Suddenly, his mind's sense detected a faint aura of Dharma power fluctuating in a ball of white light in the depths of the darkness. The aura fluctuated unsteadily, somewhat unstable and disorderly. Apparently, it had suffered serious injuries. Humph! You are indeed hiding here. Tianju's clone sneered as he raised his fists and punched at the cracks in the void. 2 streaks of golden fist radiance condensed from divine power, carrying the power to destroy everything, passed through the cracks in the void and blasted at the ball of white light in the depths of the darkness. Bang! Bang! The next moment, the 2 streaks of fist radiance hit the ball of white light, causing 2 earth-shattering explosions. Although the sound was weakened several times by the void, it was still deafening. The ball of white light was shattered into pieces and spread out in all directions. Ji Tianqing, who was hiding in it, also suffered a devastating blow. Immediately, he was cut by the disorderly power of space and blood splattered all over his body. Fortunately, he had cultivated the sword body of Paragon, so he was able to resist part of the power. He was only cut and bruised all over and covered in blood. Otherwise, he would have been cut into pieces by the power of space and his corpse would have fallen into the disorderly space. Since martial god Tianju had seen through his plan, he could no longer hide in the alternate space. He had to endure the excruciating pain, explode with the last of his Dharma power, and desperately escape from the alternate space. Swoosh! The next moment, in the void thousands of miles away from Tianju's clone, a streak of white light suddenly lit up. In the white light, Ji Tianqing, who was covered in blood and disheveled hair, staggered out. His injuries were extremely miserable, and his strength had been reduced by more than half. He was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He only turned his head and glanced at Tianju's clone, then turned and fled into the Five Elements world. The sword of burial of heaven turned into a 3-foot-long giant sword, shining with a sacred white light. He stood on the blade and used the sword controlling technique, streaking across the void at the fastest speed, like a meteor. Thousands of miles away, Tianju's clone saw the white light flying and immediately grinned hideously. Ha ha ha! The high and mighty Kenshin actually has such a day of embarrassment and humiliation. However, your embarrassment and humiliation are about to end. Since I've already made my move, how can I let you escape alive? While sneering, his whole body lit up with golden light, and he stepped across the void and chased after Ji Tianqing. He used the teleportation secret technique, seemingly taking a leisurely stroll, but in fact, every step he took was 300 miles away. After just a few breaths, he caught up with Ji Tianqing, and the distance between them was only 200 miles. The next step, he could block in front of Ji Tianqing, use the ultimate killing move, and kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. But something that Tianju's clone did not expect happened. At this moment, in the void in front of him, a circle of ripples swayed, and a dazzling icy blue light lit up. When the icy blue light appeared, a cold and dignified woman's voice also came at the same time. Tianju, without my consent, you dare to touch the people of my kingdom of God. Do you want to be my enemy? With this cold shout, a graceful and elegant figure flew out from the icy blue light. This was a young woman in her 20s. She was tall and slender, wearing an exquisite and luxurious ice blue dress. She had a beautiful face, eyebrows like distant mountains, eyes like autumn water, and a cold and elegant temperament, like an otherworldly goddess from the 9 heavens. Chapter 2207. Tianju's doppelganger immediately stopped when he saw the blue-dressed woman. He furrowed his brows and stared coldly at the woman in the blue dress. His eyes were filled with shock. Luo Shui, you're here to stop me? And you're here with your real body? Without a doubt, the blue-dressed woman was Luo Shui, martial god. Moreover, she wasn't like Tianju, who only sent a doppelganger here. She was here with her real body. Luo Shui, martial god, stood proudly in the void and stared coldly at Tianju's doppelganger. She said in a deep voice, "So what? You?" Tianju's doppelganger had mixed feelings. He was shocked and angry. He asked coldly, "Weren't you in seclusion in the Divine Kingdom? When did you come out?" "Ha ha." Luo Shui, martial god, sneered and asked back, "Do I have to report to you when I come out?" Tianju's doppelganger frowned and his eyes became gloomy. He thought to himself, "Damn bastard. I spent so many years of effort to send you to Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. I didn't expect that I couldn't even find out something as important as Luo Shui coming out of seclusion. You're going to ruin my plan today." Thinking of this, he gnashed his teeth in hatred and clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. Luo Shui, martial god, asked in a dignified tone, "Tianju, it seems that you've forgotten the agreement between the 3 divine kingdoms. How dare you attack my heavenly imperial guardian? You're the sinner who started the war between the divine kingdoms by trampling on the agreement. Today, if you don't give me an explanation, I'll destroy your doppelganger. I'll take over the 6 eastern regions of Tianju's divine kingdom." Tianju's doppelganger's expression froze. He sneered, "Heavenly Imperial Guardian? What a joke. Everyone knows Ji Tianqing's real identity. Don't play dumb with me. He's Kenshin's reincarnation. Don't you know that? If not, why would you protect him like this and give him the title of Heavenly Imperial Guardian? Luo Shui Martial God sneered and said indifferently, I don't know what you're talking about. Ji Tianxing was only a young martial saint in his 20s. He is the #1 god disciple of my Luotian mountain, as well as the #1 general of my Luotian divine nation. He has made world-shaking contributions and is my most valued right-hand man. You are the master of the Heaven and divine nation, but you actually killed a junior. Such a method is truly despicable and shameless. Tianju's clone immediately looked up to the sky and laughed, saying in a mocking tone, Luo Shui, since you're pretending to be confused, this god won't talk nonsense with you. It's a pity that even though you're devoted and loyal to Kenshin, they treat you like dirt and discard you like a worn-out shoe. Not to mention spending time with you, even when he ascended to the upper realm, he wasn't willing to bring you along. Now that he has been reborn, you still love him so much that you didn't hesitate to enter the void to protect him. He was heartless to you, but you gave so much to him. How foolish and laughable! The void was different from the 5 elements world. There was no heaven and earth spiritual chi, not even air. No matter if it was a martial saint or a martial god, entering the void was very dangerous. It would quickly consume one's spiritual power and affect one's martial arts foundation. Even a martial god expert would weaken his strength and realm if he entered the void too many times and for too long. Because of this, martial god Tianju only sent his clone here. Martial god Luoshui's real body came to the void to weaken his own strength imperceptibly, which was disadvantageous to him. She looked at Tianju's clone expressionlessly. After he finished speaking, she said indifferently, Kenshin has already fallen. The past is the past, and I've already let it go. No matter how you ridicule me, I feel nothing. However, have you thought about the consequences of deliberately provoking me? Tianju's clone immediately frowned and asked with a guarded face, What? You really want to attack this god? If you stop now, this god can let Ji Tianxing escape back to the 5 elements world. If you insist on attacking, this god will no longer care about the alliance. When the 2 divine nations have a conflict, the Luo Shui divine nation will only suffer. Luo Shui, you must think carefully. Indeed, the Luo Shui divine nation had just been invaded by the demon race army. After a cruel war, the Luo Shui divine nation's talents and experts had withered. Now that they were recuperating, it was indeed inappropriate to start a war again. However, martial god Luo Shui raised her eyebrows and sneered, Tianju, you're too conceited. You only sent a divine soul clone, but I'm here with my real body. If I want to destroy your clone, how many moves do you think it will take? You dare. Tianju's clone was instantly enraged and asked in a deep voice, Luo Shui, what do you want to do? What do I want to do? Martial god Luo Shui sneered, Of course, I want to uphold justice and urge your Tianju divine nation to do things impartially. Tianju's clone frowned again and showed a puzzled expression. What do you mean? Martial god Luo Shui said slowly, First, Ji Tianxing is the heavenly imperial guardian of my Luo Shui divine nation. You and anyone from Tianju divine nation are not allowed to attack him. Second, Ji Tianxing is participating in the divine martial sacred assembly, so he should take first place and receive the rewards he deserves. Third, let your son Yuanzhen announce the results of the ranking in public, restore Ji Tianxing's reputation, and apologize to Ji Tianxing in public. Tianju's clone sneered after hearing these 3 conditions. Humph! Luo Shui, I think you're crazy. You dare to negotiate with me? First, second, and third? What a joke. Martial god Luo Shui was not angry and said coldly, Is it? Okay, then I'll take you down first, then I'll negotiate with you. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her hands and waved her sleeves, shooting out an overwhelming icy blue brilliance. Whoosh! The icy blue brilliance turned into a dozen icy blue light pillars that swept toward Tianju's clone. Tianju's clone's expression changed, and he immediately waved his palms, shooting out dozens of golden palm shadows. Bang! 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 The golden palms collided with the icy blue light pillars, creating a series of loud bangs and shattering at the same time. Tianju's clone was sent flying, his body trembling with golden light. Martial god Luo Shui turned into a blue light and chased after him, waving his palms again. Boom! 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 The two sides fought in the void, creating earth-shattering noises and dazzling brilliance. Soon, 30 breaths' time passed. Martial god Luo Shui and Tianju's clone exchanged more than 1,000 moves, and the winner was finally decided. The result was obvious. Tianju's clone was beaten black and blue, missing an arm and a leg. His body was full of cracks and his golden light dimmed. Martial god Luo Shui used a huge ice phoenix claw to capture him, making him unable to move or escape. Martial god Luo Shui said expressionlessly, "Tianju, you only have two choices now. Either you agree to my conditions, or I'll destroy your clone. You spent a wisp of your divine soul and 300 years of hard work to refine this divine soul avatar." Chapter 2208. Martial god Luo Shui's tone was calm and indifferent. She did not pretend to be fierce or angry. But it was precisely because of this that martial god Tianju knew very well that she would definitely do as she said. Were those three conditions more important, or was the avatar more important? Tianju's clone fell into silence, hesitating and weighing the pros and cons. Indeed, martial god Luo Shui's request was excessive. Not only did she want Yuan Zhen to apologize to Ji Tianxing, but she also wanted to restore Ji Tianxing's reputation and give him the reward of first place in the sacred assembly. Although martial god Tianju did not care about the resources and pearls rewarded for first place in the sacred assembly. However, he had originally planned to give the pearl to Yuan Chong in disguise. But now Yuan Chong was dead, and Yuan Zhen's plan had failed. Martial god Tianju had suffered a double loss, and he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. His main body was cultivating in seclusion, and only his avatar had entered the void to kill Ji Tianxing. However, martial god Luo Shui's main body had arrived and easily captured him. If he did not agree to martial god Luo Shui's conditions, this avatar would be destroyed. At that time, not only would his soul be affected, but he would also be unable to control his divine kingdom for a short period of time. After his seclusion ended, he would have to spend another 300 years to refine another avatar. It was time-consuming and exhausting. When he thought of this, martial god Tianju was in a dilemma, unable to make a choice. Martial god Luo Shui also saw his struggle and said coldly, "You only have 2 hours to consider. I'll take you back to Skygaze City first. I think that when you reach the void platform, you will know what to choose." With that, she carried Tianju's avatar and flew through the void, flying toward the 5 elements realm at a speed faster than the speed of light. Tianju's avatar's eyes immediately widened in anger and worry. He was the noble ruler of the Tianju divine kingdom, yet he had been captured by martial god Luo Shui and escorted back to Skygaze City? Even if he was only an avatar, when he appeared in front of everyone, it would definitely cause a huge uproar and make him a huge laughingstock. Once he appeared, this earth-shattering news would spread throughout the entire Shenwu continent. Even if one used their toes to think, they would know that he would become the object of ridicule and discussion among martial artists for countless years to come. The more Tianju's clone thought about it, the more upset he became. Finally, he could not hold back his anger and shouted angrily, "Luo Shui, you are really ruthless. But have you ever thought about the consequences of humiliating me like this?" "Haha! What consequences can there be?" The Luo Shui martial god sneered as he sped through the void. "It's nothing more than you taking revenge on the Luo Shui divine kingdom in your rage. However, your main body is still in seclusion, and I don't know how many years it will take before you come out. At that time, the Luo Shui divine nation might not be afraid of you. Right now, you only have one divine soul avatar, which you use to control the divine kingdom. However, I came out of seclusion in advance and acted with my true body. If I don't take advantage of you now, when will I? You! Tianju's clone was so angry that his whole body trembled, and his eyes were almost spitting fire. However, Luo Shui martial god was right. He had indeed lost. He lost because he couldn't come out of seclusion earlier than Luo Shui martial god. After a moment of silence, Tianju's clone suppressed his anger and said in a low voice, "Luo Shui, you win. This time, I admit defeat and agree to your conditions." That's good. Luo Shui martial god nodded and said expressionlessly, "It's useless to just agree. I have to take you to Sky Gazing City and personally supervise you to fulfill my conditions. Don't worry, as long as you don't go back on your words, I won't throw you in front of everyone and make you lose face." Tianju's clone didn't answer, but snorted coldly, full of anger. However, he was indeed relieved and thought to himself, "Luo Shui, this god will remember today's humiliation. When this god achieves great success and comes out of seclusion, I will take revenge tenfold. At that time, not only will I trample you under my feet, but I will also destroy the Luo Shui divine kingdom. As for Ji Tianxing, even if this god's main body doesn't come out of seclusion, I can still kill him. I won't let him live until then." Tianju's clone didn't speak anymore and remained silent. Luo Shui martial god also didn't say a word and hurried on with Tianju's clone. But in fact, there was a trace of coldness hidden in her clear and calm eyes, as if she had already made up her mind. Swoosh! Dazzling starlight streaked across the void like a meteor. In the silver light, it was Ji Tianxing, whose white robe was stained with blood and his hair was disheveled. After escaping from Tianju's clone, he flew continuously for an entire day without stopping for a moment. At this time, he was already very far away from the previous area and very close to the Five Elements world. Hundreds of thousands of miles ahead of them was a gigantic star shining with golden light. He turned his head and looked at the void behind him. Seeing that no one was chasing him, he gradually slowed down and relaxed his mind. Phew! Fortunately, martial god Tianju's clone didn't chase after me. He let out a long breath and hurriedly activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl, releasing a dense white light to cover his body and quickly heal his injuries. At the same time, the voice of the burial of heaven also sounded in his mind. The person who appeared out of thin air and blocked Tianju's clone seemed to be a woman? Ji Tianxing's body stiffened. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "Yes, it's her." The burial of heaven said with a complicated tone, "I thought you didn't see her. So you already knew. Since she made a move, martial god Tianju's clone definitely can't escape. You're already out of danger." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "How can you be so sure?" "Of course." The burial of heaven said with certainty, "Her clone was destroyed by the ancestor demon god long ago. Since she appeared now, it must be her true body. She will definitely win against Tianju's clone with her true body." Ji Tianxing said calmly, "But everyone knows that if the true body enters the void, it will affect the foundation of the divine Tao and quickly weaken one's strength." The burial of heaven said with some anger, "Nonsense, she knows this better than anyone. But if she wants to save you, she will not care about the consequences and the price. Don't you know? It's fine if you pretended to be deaf and mute in your previous life, but in this life, do you still want to let her down? Not to mention her, even my sword can't stand it anymore." Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, "The past is the past. In this life, I am only Ji Tianxing, not some Kenshin. I just want to accompany my wife and child. I don't want to owe anyone anything." The burial of heaven sneered and asked, "Ha ha, if that's really the case, then why did you stay in the Luo Shui divine kingdom? Why did you fight for the Luo Shui divine kingdom, and repel the demon army. Do you dare say that you didn't do all this to make up for your regrets and repay her kindness? Ji Tianqing remained silent and closed his eyes to circulate his energy. Chapter 2209. After an unknown period of time, Burial of Heaven carried Ji Tianqing and flew to the vicinity of the Five Elements world. 10,000 miles ahead was the golden light shield that enveloped the world. Burial of Heaven stopped and transmitted his voice to Ji Tianqing. The God Seal is in front of us. If we want to return to the Five Elements world, I'm afraid it'll be a little troublesome. Ji Tianqing was closing his eyes to heal his injuries. Hearing Burial of Heaven's transmission, he opened his eyes and observed the golden light shield in front of him. He nodded and said with a solemn expression, "This golden light shield is the God Seal. With our current strength, it's impossible to break it. Only by finding the gap in the light shield can we return to the Five Elements world." Gap. Burial of Heaven thought for a moment and asked, "Like the gap we saw before, the one caused by the phantom star core? And the one in the north underworld mountain, under the ghost desert, the one caused by the wreckage of the divine warship?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "That's right. But don't worry, I still have a way to return to the Five Elements world quickly." "What way?" Burial of Heaven asked. Ji Tianqing smiled and said in a mysterious tone, "Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower." When he left Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower, he had refined a small golden tower on the 5th floor of the tower and stored it in his sea of consciousness. He only needed to use his divine thought to communicate with the small golden tower, and he could return to Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower instantly. Burial of Heaven was relieved and said in a gratified tone, "That's a good idea. You can return to Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower with a thought. I just don't know if the small tower can still sense the Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower when you're in the void now?" Ji Tianqing said with certainty that Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower is a king-grade artifact that can isolate the heavenly axiom. Even if I'm in the void, it shouldn't be a problem. Burial of Heaven hurriedly urged, "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and summon the small tower." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Look at the void in front of us. Doesn't this golden light shield look a little familiar?" "What do you mean?" Burial of Heaven was a little confused, not understanding what he was trying to do. Ji Tianqing's smile became more and more playful. His tone was somewhat self-deprecating as he said, "I don't know if our luck is too good, or if we flew in the wrong direction when we were escaping. This void and this seal are a little familiar. It's not far from the ethereal star core." "There's such a thing?" Burial of Heaven was shocked. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. "Of course. Maybe the heavens are really looking after me? Or is it because the Five Elements world is rotating too fast and has sent the ethereal star nucleus to me?" Burial of Heaven quickly asked, "No. I mean, there's nothing special about this area. It's no different from the other voids. How can you remember it?" Ji Tianqing nodded again and said proudly, "Have you forgotten? Eidetic memory is my innate ability. If I remember correctly, we can see the ethereal star nucleus after we fly 1,000,000 miles to the right." Burial of Heaven said doubtfully, "If that's the case, let's go and take the ethereal star nucleus first. Anyway, you've broken through to the martial sage realm. This time we can take the ethereal star nucleus, so that we don't have to make a special trip in the future." Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He quickly drove Burial of Heaven and flew to the void on the right. About 6 hours later, Burial of Heaven had flown more than 800,000 miles. At this time, Ji Tianqing saw a diamond-shaped meteorite embedded in the golden light shield in front of him. Ji Tianqing was far away. At this time, it seemed that the dark diamond-shaped meteorite was only the size of a boat. However, he knew very well that the illusory spirit star nucleus was at least 10,000 miles long. Fortunately, after 2 to 3 years, the ethereal star nucleus is still here, and has not been taken away by others." He murmured with a relieved face and heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Buried Heaven continued, "Apart from you and the martial god powerhouses, it's impossible for ordinary martial saints to take away this star core." Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a relaxed tone, "No matter what, as long as the ethereal star nucleus is still here, it's fine. Let's go and take it now. When we return to the Five Elements world, I'll try to smelt it and improve your grade." Burial of Heaven was also full of anticipation and said excitedly, "If I smelt the entire star nucleus of the big world, I can at least advance to the empty god level." The empty god level referred to the martial gods. In the Five Elements world, the empty god level magic treasure was the top divine weapon. Ji Tianqing did not say anything more. He drove Burial of Heaven through the void and flew toward the ethereal star nucleus. After a short 2 hours, he arrived near the ethereal star nucleus. Observing closely, he found that the ethereal star nucleus had not changed at all. The 10,000-mile-long diamond-shaped crystal nucleus was still inserted in the Five Elements world and pierced through the golden light barrier. On the other side of the star nucleus, there was a 20,000-mile-long star halo, like an ancient starry path. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing landed on the star nucleus and walked along the dark rocky ground toward the canyon in the middle of the star nucleus. When I entered the canyon, I found the ethereal sacred land at the end of the canyon. It was there that I found the ancient god's me star ring, which contained 18 martial sage souls and 1 martial god soul. This time, I want to refine the ethereal star nucleus, and I guess I have to go to the sacred land. It's the center of the entire star nucleus, and it's the best place to set up a formation. As he spoke, he passed through the canyon and flew toward the ethereal sacred land in the depths of the canyon. After a short quarter of an hour, he arrived at the end of the canyon. 200 miles in front of him was a wide and tall cave entrance. He had fought with the mutant blood god in this place. The ground was still full of cracks left by the sword chi, and there were many piles of broken stones. However, when he raised his head to look at the dark cave entrance, his body stiffened, and he was stunned on the spot. He saw 4 golden figures standing on both sides of the wide cave entrance. The 4 figures were all dressed like guards, but they looked a little strange. They were all more than 10 feet tall and had big heads. Their upper bodies were human, but their lower bodies were like lions. They had 4 thick hooves and dark golden manes. Their bodies were as sturdy as millstones, and they had 4 thick arms. On their broad chests, there was a basin-sized dark red scale. The scale was like a tortoise shell, with lines and lattices. There were also circles of lines in the center. Ji Tianqing observed with great detail, and discovered that the patterns on the chests of the 4 outsiders were all dark golden in color, and there were only 3 circles on each of them. Strange. Why are there alien warriors on the ethereal star nucleus? The 4 aliens look so strange. How come I've never seen them before? At the same time, the 4 alien guards also found him. Chapter 22:10. Roar, roar. With a deep roar that sounded like a lion's roar, the 4 alien guards broke through the void and rushed in front of Ji Tianqing. Swish, 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 swish. Dark red light flashed as the 4 of them spread out and surrounded Ji Tianqing. Their hooves stepped on the pitch-black rocky ground, moving slowly and circling Ji Tianqing. The halberds and long sabers in their hands were all pointed at Ji Tianqing, surrounded by dark red murderous aura. An invisible murderous aura suppressed Ji Tianqing like a huge mountain, making his blood flow sluggish and his magic power a little sluggish. Ji Tianqing frowned as he sized up the 4 non-humankind guards with a cautious look on his face. He muttered in his heart, "The power they have is a little strange. It is not the power of the 5 elements, nor is it the magic power cultivated by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. I have been to so many star areas and seen so many races, but I have never seen people of this race. Maybe they are from a star area even further away? Or a new race? The burial of heaven reminded him through soul transmission, since they appeared on the core of the illusory spirit star, have you never suspected that they might be from the illusory spirit race? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, No. When I entered the holy land of the illusory spirit race, I saw the writings and murals of the illusory spirit race. The illusory spirit race is good at mind and soul power. Their brains are different from ordinary people, but their appearance is definitely not like this. The burial of heaven said noncommittally, You will know whether they are or not when you try. Therefore, Ji Tianqing searched his memory and tried to use the language of the illusory spirit race to ask the 4 alien guards, Who are you? Why are you here? Although his pronunciation was not standard and sounded a little bad, the language of the illusory spirit race was correct. However, the illusory spirit race's language he spoke was basically correct. If the other party was from the illusory spirit race, they would definitely be able to understand him. However, something unexpected happened to Ji Tianqing. When the 4 alien guards heard him, their expressions changed. Their eyes shone fiercely, and dark red flames of murderous aura burst out of their bodies. Roar! Roar! All 4 of them let out a muffled roar simultaneously, wielding their long blades and halberds while releasing tens of dark red blood-red light beams, launching a besieging attack towards Ji Tianqing. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and transmitted his voice to Burial of Heaven. What kind of rotten idea are you giving me? At first glance, it was obvious that they had a grudge against the illusory spirit clan. As soon as he heard me speak the language of the illusory spirit race, he wanted to kill me immediately. Burial of Heaven comforted him indifferently, It's just a few low-level guards. You can easily deal with them. Ji Tianqing hurriedly brandished the Burial of Heaven sword, slashing out sword lights that filled the sky as he fought with the 4 foreign race guards. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to the Burial of Heaven. How many low-level guards? Are you kidding me? Which world's low-level guards would have the power of a martial sage? Unless they did not come from a low-level world, but from the upper world. Burial of Heaven was also stunned for a moment and said doubtfully, But they don't look like people from the upper world. We have never seen this race in the upper world. Ji Tianqing defended against the attacks of the 4 foreign race guards as he said, Anyway, this matter is very strange. Let me deal with them first, then I will slowly think about it. The attacking moves of the 4 foreign race guards were a little strange. They were not like the martial artists of the 5 elements world who paid attention to the beginning, the end, the transition and the form. The attacking moves of the 4 guards were all well-practiced killing moves, like the simplest and most brutal killing moves. Moreover, the power that they used was also dark red like blood, completely condensed from killing intent and a special aura. Every single move he executed was executed in a grand manner with surging killing intent, and it was domineering and ferocious to the extreme. Although the strength of the 4 guards was only equivalent to a rank 5 or 6 martial sage. However, it was Ji Tianqing's first time fighting with the martial artists of this race. He was not familiar with the attributes and martial skills of the other party, so he was more cautious. After a full 10 breaths, he had exchanged more than 20 moves with the 4 guards before he had a rough idea of the other party's moves. Thus, he no longer hid his strength and used his unique sword skill. Breaking Sun Sword. Burial of Heaven waved his sword and slashed out more than 10 dark gold sword radiances in an extremely violent manner, slashing towards the 4 guards. The 4 guards hurriedly waved their long sabers and halberds, letting out angry roars and releasing dark red killing intent. Instantly, the 4 of them were enveloped by the dark red killing intent, as if they were wearing a layer of dark red armor. Bang bang bang! The huge golden sword slashed the 4 guards, causing a series of dull sounds to be heard. The killing intent armor of the 4 guards was slashed into pieces, and they flew out in a sorry state, falling into a pile of rocks. Just as they got up, they rushed towards Ji Tianqing even more furiously. At this moment, Ji Tianqing waved his sword, clapped his palms, and used his unique secret skill. Heavenly Dragon Palm. Heaven-breaking sword. His left hand slapped out a mountain-sized golden dragon claw, slapping 2 guards away on the spot, smashing them into the ground hundreds of miles away. His right hand waved his sword and slashed out a huge sword that could split heaven and earth, splitting one of the guards into 2 halves on the spot, causing dark red blood to splatter everywhere. As for the last non-human guard, he had just rushed in front of him, holding his halberd and thrusting it fiercely. He clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the guard's head, using the star-breaking fist. Bang! With a dull sound, the star-breaking fist hit the guard, blasting his head into pieces, splattering blood and brain matter all over the ground. What surprised Ji Tianqing was that the non-human guard whose head was blasted into pieces did not die on the spot. Moreover, this person's divine soul did not escape from his body. The headless body got up again and rushed over without caring about its own safety, waving his halberd and thrusting out dozens of blood-red light. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing could not help but frown and exclaim in a low voice, "Oh my God! Is this possible? His vitality is too tenacious, and his willpower is too strong, isn't it?" While he was shocked, he waved the Burial of Heaven sword and stabbed out a cold light, aiming directly at the chest of the headless guard. The cold light flashed, and in the next moment it pierced the scales on the chest of the headless guard, exploding with a loud bang. Bang! With a dull sound, the dark red scales on the chest of the headless guard shattered, and his entire body was blown into pieces, scattering in the valley. This time, his body was really smashed into pieces, and he did not get up again. Ji Tianqing suddenly understood and said to himself, "I see. It seems that the weakness of these non-humans is the scales on their chests." The Burial of Heaven thought for a moment and added, "Maybe that can't be called a weakness, but the source of their strength, closely related to their lives." At this moment, a deep roar came from a spacious cave not far away. Ji Tianqing turned his head and saw more than a dozen non-human guards in black armor running out as fast as lightning. Many of the guards were holding long sabers and halberds, and they were surrounding a non-human man in silver armor with scarlet eyes. Chapter 22:11. When the silver-armored man appeared with a dozen or so guards, he was shocked. Ji Tianqing realized that the situation was not good and vaguely felt heavy pressure. The 2 alien guards he had slapped away earlier were covered in blood and in a sorry state. Seeing the silver-armored man come out, the 2 of them ignored their injuries and hurriedly retreated to the sides and knelt down. The 2 of them lowered their heads respectfully and mumbled a lot of strange syllables. Ji Tianqing listened for a while, but couldn't understand a single word. However, he could roughly guess that the 2 injured guards were most likely reporting what had happened. Sure enough, after the silver-armored man heard them, he turned his head and glanced at Ji Tianqing. 2 dark red flames rose in his scarlet eyes, flickering and dancing. He put his left hand behind his back, and his right hand held the hilt of the sword hanging at his waist, walking towards Ji Tianqing. The dozen or so black-armored guards around him also gripped their long sabers and halberds, pointing at Ji Tianqing. Everyone's eyes were cold, and their bodies exuded a terrifying murderous aura. Ji Tianqing looked at the crowd with an indifferent expression and secretly communicated with buried heaven through God's soul voice transmission. At present, it seems that this group of aliens may have a grudge against the illusory spirit race. They came to the illusory spirit star core and have already occupied the illusory spirit race's holy land. I don't know how many people are hiding in the Holy Land. If we want to take the Star Core, we have to deal with this group of people first. Burial of Heaven reminded him, they have a lot of people, and the strength of their leader is unfathomable. We shouldn't act too hastily. If you have a chance, you can capture an alien alive and use the soul-searching secret technique to interrogate him. Maybe you can get the answer. Even if you can't communicate with words, you can at least read their soul memories, right? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. This method is feasible. I'll try my best. At this moment, 16 black armored guards surrounded him. The man in silver armor also stopped 100 steps away from him. He looked at him with burning eyes and opened his mouth to speak. What's your relationship with the illusory spirit race? The silver-armored man was speaking the language of the illusory spirit clan. However, his accent sounded even worse than Ji Tianqing's. It was even weirder. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood. He replied slowly in the language of the illusory spirit race. I have nothing to do with the illusory spirit race. The 10 or so non-humankind guards didn't change their expressions at all. They didn't react to his words at all, and still looked ferocious. Only the silver-armored man understood his words. The flames in his eyes flickered a few times, as if he was considering whether his words were true or false. After a moment of silence he asked again, Are you from this planet? After saying that, he pointed at the 5 elements world behind him that was shrouded in golden light. Ji Tianqing nodded. The flames in the silver-armored man's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and a smile appeared on his broad and firm face. Good, very good. He seemed to be in a good mood. He clapped his hands and said in the broken language of the illusory spirit race, You take me in and I will spare your life. Ji Tianqing sneered and replied coldly, Ridiculous! What right do you have to spare my life? Also, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you on this star core? Why do you want to enter our world? It was probably because he had said too much and asked too many questions at once. The silver-armored man didn't understand all his questions. He only understood that his attitude was to refuse. Suddenly, the flames in the silver-armored man's eyes flickered, and a ferocious sneer appeared on his face. His whole body emitted a blazing killing intent. You have no choice. It's your honor to lead the way for heaven conquering. After saying these 2 sentences in the language of the illusory spirit race, the silver-armored man waved his hand and gave an order. Suddenly, the 10 or so non-humankind guards roared and pounced on Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. Roar! Roar, roar, roar! In an instant, the long saber and halberd danced in the air, and dark red blood radiance filled the area. It turned into various saber radiance, sword shadows, spear radiance and sharp blades, and engulfed Ji Tianqing. A terrifying murderous aura sealed off an area of a few hundred miles, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianqing. The meridians and bones in his body started to twist, and his blood seemed to be boiling. It was about to break free from his blood vessels and meridians and explode. They can affect the blood chi and mind of others with their invisible aura? This race is really not simple. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He quickly swung the Burial of Heaven sword and launched a counterattack. Big Dipper sword! Sky-capturing claw! In the face of more than 10 martial sage realm non-humankind guards, he didn't dare to be careless. He used all his strength to launch a deadly attack. In order to increase his combat strength, he even used the celestial dragon body and turned into a 100 feet tall golden armored giant. As a result, the pressure on him was greatly reduced. His body flickered as he shuttled back and forth between the canyon and the empty space, smoothly avoiding the attacks of the guards. Occasionally, there were some dark red blood radiance that slashed his body, but it only caused minor injuries. His life was not in danger. Bang bang bang! Boom 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 boom! Ji Tianqing and the dozen or so outsider guards exchanged more than 100 moves. The heavens and the earth cracked and dazzling light filled the sky. Deafening explosions resounded through the entire canyon. The incomparably violent impact shook the huge illusory spirit star nucleus. Various dark red blood radiance and silver starlight fragments burst out like raindrops and scattered in the empty space. While the 2 sides were fighting, the man in silver armor stood in the same spot and watched expressionlessly. He didn't have any intention to intervene. After about 100 breaths, Ji Tianqing and the non-humankind guards exchanged more than 100 blows. Ji Tianqing's body was covered with wounds, and pale golden blood flowed out. He had suffered some minor injuries. On the other hand, the non-humankind guards were all covered in blood and wounds. Many of them had their hands and feet cut off. They were seriously injured. At this moment, the man in silver armor waved his hand and shouted in a deep voice. Immediately, the non-humankind guards retreated, put away their weapons, and stopped attacking. The man in silver armor looked at Ji Tianqing with his burning eyes. He clapped his hands and praised, "Very good. Even in my clan, brave and skilled warriors like you are rare. I admire you. I'll give you one last chance. Work for me, be my servant, help me expand my territory, and I'll give you glory." He was still speaking in the language of the illusory spirit race, but he spoke very slowly and with an awkward accent. This was also the longest sentence he had ever spoken. Ji Tianqing sneered and shook his head. "I only work for myself. You and your race are far from qualified." The man in silver armor was not surprised at all. He sneered and said, "You are very good and proud. But unfortunately I will kill you. Remember, you will die under the blade of an Yu, the bravest captain of the Third Fleet." Chapter 22:12. Ji Tianqing was taken aback by an Yu's name and identity. Combining the memories of the past, he instantly understood many things. However, he did not have time to think carefully as the two scarlet light beams shot towards him. Star-shattering fist. At this critical moment, he raised his left hand without hesitation and blasted out a star fist radiance. Bang! The huge starlight fist hit the two scarlet light pillars hard, and a loud, muffled sound rang out. Sparks flew in all directions as the star radiance exploded and turned into a violent shockwave that spread in all directions. The non-humankind guards who were closer to the explosion were instantly blown away by the shockwave, falling into the valley in a disorderly manner. Ji Tianqing was also sent flying back 100 steps. His feet left 2 deep trenches in the ground. Just as he steadied himself, a Yu rushed towards him again and punched his head with both fists. Before the crimson flame fist radiance reached him, the violent killing intent had already hit him. It was like thousands of needles pricking his skin. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to wave the Burial of Heaven sword and stabbed out 7 rays of dazzling cold light. 7 stars sword. The 7 cold sword rays formed a formation and enveloped an Yu's figure. However, with a series of loud bangs, the 7 sword rays were all shattered by the flame fist radiance. The crimson killing intent dissipated, but the flame fist radiance did not weaken much. It landed on Ji Tianqing's chest. Bang! Amidst a muffled sound, a terrifying force blasted Ji Tianqing away. While he was still in midair, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pale golden blood. He drew an arc in the air and smashed into the ruins 10 miles away with a plop sound, splashing rocks all over the sky. When he got up from the rubble, he looked down and saw a deep hole in his chest. Golden blood was seeping out. Ji Tianqing frowned and his eyes became very serious. This person's strength is so strong. Even if I use the celestial dragon tyrant body, I still can't take a punch from him? Burial of Heaven said through voice transmission, "It seems like this guy's strength has surpassed the martial sage realm. He did not use any weapons or his full strength. You are no match for him. You can only avoid him for now." Ji Tianqing naturally knew that an Yu's strength was unfathomable. He was comparable to a martial god. It was impossible for him to take away the ethereal star nucleus. The only thing he could do now was to escape from this place. Shwa! He manipulated the power of space and turned into a ray of white light. He instantly pierced through the void and flew toward the world of 5 elements. And you saw him turn around and fly away, and immediately grinned. His eyes were full of contempt. He strode across the void and crossed 100 miles in the blink of an eye, catching up to Ji Tianqing. He raised his fists and blasted out 2 dark red light pillars. The dark red murderous aura formed 2 beams of light that were like 2 thunderbolts streaking across the void, about to strike Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing sensed great danger. He felt a chill run down his spine as though death was approaching. At the moment of life and death, he turned around without hesitation. He struck out a 5-colored sacred thunder with his left hand and a star sword with his right hand. God's slaying sword. The star sword that was 100 feet long hit one of the dark red light pillars, and there was a loud boom. The star sword and the light pillars collapsed at the same time, and there was a strong shock wave. The 5-colored sacred thunder also hit one of the light pillars. Both of them shattered at the same time and turned into a colorful shock wave. Ji Tianqing did not have time to escape. He was hit by the violent shock wave and was sent flying toward the world of 5 elements. His injuries had worsened. Blood flowed from his mouth and nose, and his consciousness was blurry. However, he relied on his strong willpower to stay awake. He recklessly exploded his strength and flew toward the end of the ethereal star nucleus. A few thousand miles in front of him was the golden light seal of the world of 5 elements. At the end of the star nucleus there was a void crack. He had returned to the world of 5 elements from there. He saw that he was getting closer and closer to the void crack. However, Yu caught up with him again. He waved his hand and 2 dark red blood light blades slashed down from the sky. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to grit his teeth. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, turned around, and slashed out a light blade. Heavenly Dragon Slash! The dark golden sword light that was 100 feet long carried an indomitable and domineering aura. It met the 2 blood light blades head-on. Boom! There was another crisp explosion. The sword light and the blood light blades shattered at the same time. They turned into a dark red hurricane and engulfed Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! The violent hurricane engulfed him, and he was covered in wounds. Blood splattered, and he was sent flying toward the end of the star nucleus. The hurricane flew for 1,000 miles before it gradually dissipated. Ji Tianqing's figure was revealed. He was already riddled with scars and bruises. His injuries were even worse, and his strength had been greatly reduced. He fell to the hard ground with a thud. Fortunately, he was even closer to the void crack. He ignored his injuries and pain and sprinted as fast as he could. In just 3 short breaths, he had crossed 200 miles and plunged into the void crack without any regard for his own safety. Swoosh! The pitch-black void crack swallowed his figure, and he disappeared instantly. At the same time, Yu turned into a blood light and flew to the end of the illusory spirit star nucleus. He saw Ji Tianqing enter the void crack with his own eyes. However, he did not chase after him. He stopped in the void crack. He frowned and looked at the void crack. Flames flickered in his eyes. He seemed to be weighing his options. Soon, more than a dozen black-armored guards flew over and landed behind him. One of the guard captains bowed respectfully, revealing an inquiring expression as he mumbled a few words. Yu thought for a while and then nodded. He gave an order with a dignified face. The guard captain quickly turned around and left. He returned to the canyon and entered the holy land of the illusory spirit clan. About a quarter of an hour later, the guard captain returned with more than 60 black-armored guards. A total of 80 guards gathered behind Yu. Yu waved his hand and gave the order. He was the first to enter the void crack. Swoosh! A black light flashed and his figure was swallowed by the void crack. Then, the 80 black-armored guards entered the void crack one after another. In the 100,000 mountains, under the famous Broken Soul Cliff, there was a pitch-black abyss that was tens of thousands of feet deep. In an inconspicuous corner of the cold and dark abyss, an inconspicuous speck of dust was buried in a pile of rock. Compared to the entire abyss, this speck of dust was just a drop in the ocean. No one would notice it. However, no one would have thought that this speck of dust was Ji Tianqing. After he passed through the void crack and escaped from the illusory spirit star nucleus, he returned to this abyss. However, he was not in a hurry to escape. Instead, he stayed. Chapter 22:13. For a full quarter of an hour, Ji Tianqing remained in his dust state. He didn't move at all, nor did he reveal any aura. His disguise was flawless. Burial of Heaven was a little worried and asked through soul transmission, "You've finally escaped. Why don't you take the opportunity to escape from here and get rid of those aliens?" Ji Tianqing replied with soul transmission, "I will never give up on what I want to do. Since I've decided to take the ethereal star core, how can I give up halfway?" "What?" Burial of Heaven was shocked and asked incredulously, "But the ethereal star core has been occupied by those aliens. It's not easy for you to escape. Do you still want to hide here and wait for the opportunity to go back and snatch the ethereal star core?" "Why not?" Ji Tianqing said with certainty. "Although I can't defeat you and those aliens, I still have a chance. Judging from various signs, they are aliens from a distant star area. Most of them are on a mission and have no intention of refining the ethereal star core. Compared to the ethereal star core, they are more interested in the five elements world. I bet that when Yu sees me escape into the void crack, he will probably bring his men and chase after me. When they enter the five elements world, I will come back and have an 80% chance of snatching the ethereal star core." Hearing what he said, Burial of Heaven also felt that it made sense. He said in a serious tone, "As you always say, wealth comes from danger. Since you feel confident, then take the risk. Anyway, it won't take long. We will see the result in half an hour at most." Ji Tianqing said with a playful tone, "No need for half an hour. They are already here." Sure enough, in the darkness at the bottom of the abyss, there was a sudden spatial fluctuation. The next moment, a tall and sturdy figure appeared out of thin air in the darkness. Then, a series of spatial fluctuations came out one after another, and black figures appeared one after another. There was no doubt that these people were Yu and the 80 black armored guards. About 10 breaths later, everyone had arrived. Yu also released his divine sense, and covered a radius of nearly 1,000 miles to figure out the terrain of this area. Thus, he led the black armored guards out of the abyss and flew to the Broken Soul Cliff. After staying on the Broken Soul Cliff for a while, he weighed the pros and cons before flying north. Not long after, Yu and the black armored guards disappeared into the horizon. At this time, Ji Tianqing, who was hiding in a corner of the abyss, removed his disguise. Shua. He returned to his original form and flew toward the bottom of the abyss with the sword of Burial of Heaven in hand. Burial of Heaven let out a sigh of relief and said in a relaxed tone, "I didn't expect you to make the right bet. That guy actually brought 80 black armored guards here to kill you." Ji Tianqing frowned and said with a solemn expression, "Maybe he's not just hunting me down. He's more interested in this world." Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, and then said in a strange tone, "So, they were stationed on the ethereal star core before, and never made up their minds to enter the five elements world. Or maybe they didn't find the entrance to the five elements world. Now, you've accidentally become their guide and brought them into the five elements world?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a low voice, "I have a bad premonition. Perhaps the Shenwu continent, which has finally calmed down, will experience another great upheaval." Burial of Heaven consoled him, "You're worrying too much. Even if there really is a great upheaval, it's something that the three war gods should be worried about. Besides, how much trouble could Yu and his 80 non-humankind guards cause? The most important thing right now is for you to recover from your injuries and take the ethereal star core." Ji Tianqing nodded and did not say anything else. Soon, he passed through the spatial crack and returned to the ethereal star core. The giant star core was still stuck in the golden barrier, floating motionlessly in the void. Ji Tianqing flew to the end of the canyon and entered the wide cave. After walking along the dark passage for a while, he entered the ethereal tribe's sacred land and saw the broken 7 halls. He circled the 7 halls twice and used his divine sense to scan them several times, but he did not find a single person. Just as he had expected, Anu had taken away all of the foreign races. Now, he was the only one left on the ethereal star core. Thus, Ji Tianqing entered one of the halls and began to treat his injuries. He took a few Saint-grade pills and used the power of the Heaven Mend Pearl to quickly heal his injuries and restore his magic power. After about half a day, his injuries stabilized, and his magic power had recovered by about 70 to 80%. He then began to set up a large array in the ethereal tribe's sacred land, preparing to take the star core. He wanted to set up a top-notch Saint-grade array called the Sumer Mustard Seed Array. This Saint-grade array was a mysterious array that many master artificers would use when refining spatial rings. As the saying goes, a mountain can be refined to the size of a sesame seed. Even a mountain can be refined to the size of a sesame seed. Ji Tianqing took out thousands of supreme-grade spirit stones and hundreds of jade slips from his spatial ring. Then, he summoned Lan Kuan, Bai Long, Jinshan King, Ancestor Sanju, and the others. Although they were only in the tribulation-passing realm, they could help him set up the array and save time. Ji Tianqing distributed the spirit stones and jade slips to everyone, assigning them a corresponding task. Then, he began to cast spells to set up the foundation of the array, shooting out golden light pillars that crisscrossed the entire sacred land. About 8 hours later, the foundation of the array was in its embryonic form. On the pitch-black rocky ground, thousands of golden arcs could be seen clearly, forming a huge and complicated net. Next, Bai Long, Lan Kuan, Jinshan King, and the others buried the spirit stones and jade slips in specific places according to his instructions. Everyone was busy, wholeheartedly setting up the array. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, another half a day had passed. After everyone's joint efforts, the Sumer Mustard Seed Array was finally set up. A 5-colored light shield with a radius of 400 miles enveloped the phantom spirit's sacred land, shining with dazzling brilliance and releasing powerful energy waves. Ji Tianqing kept Bai Long, Lan Kuan, Jinshan King, and the others back into the sword world. Then, he flew into the dark void and cast spells with a solemn expression, beginning to control the Sumer Mustard Seed Array. Swoosh! The array began to operate, and the huge 5-colored light shield lit up with dense light, releasing a mysterious spatial power that extended in all directions. 15 minutes later, the vast power of the entire array spread to a range of 20,000 miles, enveloping the entire phantom spirit star core. Ji Tianqing began to exert force, manipulating the power of the Sumer Mustard Seed Array, constantly squeezing and shrinking the star core. The phantom spirit star core was not an ordinary rock or meteorite, but the crystallization of the entire star, which could transmit magical power and star power. Chapter 22:14. Wanting to refine a star crystal core that was 20,000 miles in size was an extremely difficult task. In the current Shenwu continent, only the 3 martial gods had the ability to do so. Ordinary martial saints did not even dare to think about it. Only Ji Tianqing's knowledge was extraordinary. He had actually thought of using the spatial ring's Sumer Mustard Seed Array to refine this star core. Of course, only he could do it. If it were any of the Shenwu continent's master refiners, even if they were proficient in the Sumer Mustard Seed Array, they would not have the courage, or experience to do so. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The huge ethereal star core had shrunk by half, and it was now only 10,000 kilometers in size. Ji Tianqing did not relax at all, and he continued to focus on controlling the array to refine the star core. As time passed, the ethereal star core became smaller and smaller. Of course, the speed at which it shrank also slowed down. The smaller the star core, the more difficult it would be to shrink it. Ji Tianxing's goal was to refine the ethereal star core until it was 50 kilometers in size. Only then could he successfully store it in the sword's world. Skyview City. Hundreds of thousands of warriors and commoners were still gathered in the city's plaza. Even though the 8 silver light curtains around the high platform had always been pitch black, the light curtains had always been black. However, many cultivators still waited patiently. Only a small number of people got impatient and left early. This was because everyone had received news that something had happened during the sacred assembly. And it was a major event. During the final battle for the championship, an accident had occurred in the void platform, causing Ji Tianxing to disappear without a trace. Yuan Chong had died on the spot. It was said that Yuan Zhen, who had presided over the sacred assembly, was grieving and had prepared to end the assembly hastily and return to arrange Yuan Chong's funeral. However, the young martial saints of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom and the Boundless Divine Kingdom had insisted that Yuan Zhen take responsibility for this matter. They had to investigate the truth and give everyone an explanation. Thus, Yuan Zhen had no choice but to lead the Divine Guard Governor and the Skyview City Lord into the void to search for Ji Tianxing's whereabouts. After he left, the 30 or so martial saints who had participated in the sacred assembly remained on the void platform, waiting for news. Everyone agreed on a time limit of 2 days. After 2 days, regardless of the results of the search, Yuan Zhen would return. At this point, 1 day and 12 hours had already passed. In another 12 hours, Yuan Zhen would appear. The hundreds of thousands of warriors in the square were waiting with complicated feelings. They would talk about it occasionally. Everyone wanted to see if Ji Tianxing, who had always been good at creating miracles, would be able to escape death and miraculously survive. On the void platform, on the white light disk, over 30 martial sages sat on the ground silently, waiting quietly. In the beginning, after Yuan Zhen left with his people, the crowd would still gather in groups of 3 to 5 to discuss. Will Ji Tianxing die? How terrifying was the void storm! Yuan Zhen brought Qin Zheng and Wang Tian City Lord into the void. Could they find Ji Tianxing within 2 days? Could it be that they couldn't find Ji Tianxing and would be in danger instead? Even the 5 veteran martial sages communicated with each other secretly through sound transmission, trying to figure out and analyze the answer together. But now, a day and a half had passed. Everything that needed to be said and discussed had been said. The only thing they could do was to sit on the white disk and close their eyes, waiting for the result. Anyway, they had already agreed to stay and be witnesses. They couldn't give up halfway. Moreover, Yuan Zhen said that he would give the results in 2 days. If they waited patiently for another 12 hours, everything would be over. However, no one knew. In the alternate space near the void platform, a young woman in an ice blue dress stood. Her expression was indifferent. She was carrying Tianju's clone, who was riddled with wounds and battered. She looked calmly at the void platform and the hundreds of thousands of warriors in the Wang Tian City Square. She took in everyone's expressions and reactions. However, no one noticed her and Tianju's clone. Tianju's clone had been captured by her all this time. He felt extremely aggrieved. Seeing that she was silent for a few hours, he couldn't help but ask, "Luo Shui, how long are you going to stand here?" After Ji Tianxing escaped, he didn't return to Wang Tian City at all. He wouldn't dare to come back. Why don't we just let this matter go? Without waiting for Tianju's clone to finish speaking, Luo Shui said coldly, "Your son Yuan Zhen also didn't come back after escaping to the 5 Elements world. Since Yuan Zhen set a time limit of 2 days when he left, let's wait until the time limit is up." This. Tianju's clone's expression stiffened. Anger flashed in his eyes. This undoubtedly meant that he would be captured by Luo Shui for half a day. After hesitating for a moment, he tried asking, "It's not a good idea to wait like this. Why don't I send a message to Yuan Zhen and ask him to come to Wang Tian City as soon as possible? Luo Shui, you also send a message to Ji Tianxing. Ask him to return to the void platform. Let's end this matter as soon as possible. Hearing Tianju's clone's suggestion, Luo Shui martial god thought for a moment before nodding slightly. That's good too. But don't think of playing any tricks. Only after you fulfill your promise will I let you go. Tianju's clone gritted his teeth with a face full of resentment. In the end, he nodded. Then, he sent a message to Yuan Zhen, which contained his personal order. Luo Shui martial god also sent a message to Ji Tianxing, asking him to return to Wang Tian City as soon as possible. North of Wang Tian City, there was a giant peak tens of thousands of feet tall, surrounded by clouds and mist. It was called Tianju Mountain. This was the martial arts holy land of Tianju Divine Nation, Tianju's training ground. There were close to 10,000 disciples on Tianju Mountain. They were all extraordinary talents in the Divine Nation. There were hundreds of houses and palaces on the peak of the mountain. It was grand and magnificent. In the depths of a magnificent palace, in a secret room full of spiritual qi, Yuan Zhen, who was dressed in a silver robe, was sitting cross-legged in a jade pool. He held a spiritual stone in each hand to heal himself. Although he had already washed up and changed into a brand new robe and hair accessories, he was still covered in wounds. However, he was covered in wounds. His face, neck, shoulders, and arms were all covered in cracks and wounds, especially his chest and abdomen, which were still empty. His bones and internal organs could be seen clearly. Although his plan had failed, he had suffered heavy losses, and he had been seriously injured by Ji Tianxing. But he was well aware that Father God had personally made a move. Ji Tianxing could not escape this calamity. Thinking of this, he felt slightly comforted. He had already made up his mind to heal himself first. After the 2-day period was over, he would return to the void stage and publicly announce Ji Tianxing's death. Of course, Ji Tianxing had died tragically in the void storm. His corpse had nothing to do with him. At this moment, a dense stream of light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. He felt something and opened his eyes. He found that it was a communication jade slip engraved with dragon patterns. Seeing the appearance of this jade slip, his eyes immediately lit up. He muttered to himself with anticipation, "It's actually a message from Father God? Father God must have killed Ji Tianxing and specially informed me." Chapter 22:15. Yuan Zhen was filled with joy, thinking that martial god Tianju had sent him good news. But when his divine sense read the information in the jade slip, the joy in his heart disappeared on the spot. He was stunned, his expression dull, his eyes wide open, revealing a look of disbelief. After being stunned for a long time, he came back to his senses and roared in disbelief, "Why? Why didn't Ji Tianxing die? Not only did Father not kill Ji Tianxing, but he also told me to admit that he was first place and give him the corresponding reward, and he also told me to apologize to him? This is impossible. I don't believe that Father would tell me to do this." Yuan Zhen was so angry that he couldn't understand what was going on. His angry face twisted. He subconsciously clenched the jade slip and was about to crush it. But he immediately hesitated. Then, he carefully read the communication jade slip from beginning to end. Without a doubt, this was the message that martial god Tianju sent him. There was no falsehood. Suddenly, as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, he fell limply into the spirit liquid pool, smiling bitterly and angry. After a full quarter of an hour, he pulled himself together and his emotions returned to normal. Then, he expressionlessly put away the jade slip, closed his eyes and continued to heal. No matter how angry he was, no matter how humiliated or confused he was, he could not disobey martial god Tianju's orders. He also believed that Father must have made such a decision for a reason. Perhaps Ji Tianxing had been subdued by Father and became his lackey? Yes, it was very likely so. Yuan Zhen comforted himself. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. It was evening. Yuan Zhen's injuries were temporarily suppressed. Even if his complexion and aura were still very weak, it was not a big problem. He finished healing and got up to leave the secret room. Whoosh! He flew into the sky, left Tianju Mountain, and flew towards Wangtian City in the south. After flying leisurely for half an hour, he arrived at the square in Wangtian City. The hundreds of thousands of martial artists and commoners in the square suddenly saw him appear, and immediately let out earth-shaking cheers and shouts. Everyone look, it's First Highness Yuan Zhen. First Highness really came back. Great. We'll know the result soon. Strange, where are Lord Qin and the City Lord? Why is it only the First Highness? Where did the others go? Countless martial artists noticed the anomaly and started shouting and discussing loudly. Yuan Zhen did not even glance at those martial artists, directly landing on the high platform in the middle of the plaza. Then, he activated the formation, passed through the golden door of light, and entered the void platform. Shwa! When he appeared on the white light disk, more than 30 martial saints who were resting with their eyes closed were immediately awakened. Everyone opened their eyes and looked at Yuan Zhen in unison, their eyes filled with anticipation. Martial Saint Qinshan, Chao Ing, Chen Yu, and the others hurriedly stood up and greeted him, asking about the situation with concern. Your Highness, you're finally back. Dare I ask, Your Highness, how is the situation? Is Ji Tianxing dead? By the way, Your Highness, where are Lord Qin and the City Lord? His Highness's aura is rather weak. Could it be that he is seriously injured? A few young martial saints from the Heaven and Divine Nation hurriedly came over and asked about his well-being. Yuan Zhen remained silent and did not answer. He walked through the crowd and walked towards the white light disk. The 5 veteran martial saints, Taihao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu, Lu Baishuang, and the others all looked at him with burning eyes, waiting for him to announce the result. Lu Baishuang was the most worried and anxious. She had been suffering for the past 2 days. Now that Yuan Zhen had returned and seemed to be seriously injured, she had a bad premonition and could not help but ask, Yuan Zhen, did you find Ji Tianxing? How is he? Why are you the only one who came back alone? What Lu Baishuang asked was also what everyone was concerned about. The other martial saints all echoed and asked about the situation and the result. Yuan Zhen could not stand the continuous questioning and could only bite the bullet and answer, Everyone, please calm down and listen to my detailed explanation. I brought Lord Qin and the Sky City Lord into the void to search. Unfortunately, we were attacked by the void storm and a group of meteorites. In order to protect me, Lord Qin and the Sky City Lord sacrificed themselves heroically. Not even their bones were left. Even I was seriously injured in the void storm and almost lost my life. Yuan Zhen's face was solemn as he spoke in a low voice. He was very sad and sorrowful. Almost no one doubted his words and immediately believed him. Many martial saints looked worried and secretly clenched their fists. They were worried about what had happened to Yuan Zhen. Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and the others looked even more dignified and ugly. Yuan Zhen was silent for a moment and continued, however, after I almost died, I finally found Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing, he is really lucky. He was swept into the void by the void storm and did not die on the spot. He is still alive, but he is seriously injured. Now he is still healing himself and can't come back with me. However, please wait patiently. He should be back soon. Hearing his words, many martial saints revealed looks of astonishment as they let out cries of disbelief. Oh my God! That guy really didn't die? Good people don't live long, but bad people live for 1,000 years. Cough, cough, that guy is too tough. I have long guessed that Ji Tianxing is not an ordinary person. How could he die so easily? All the legends about him are miracles. Even if he fell into the void, he could still miraculously survive. This is too normal. The many martial sages discussed animatedly. They were all emotional, and shocked. the hearts of Liu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi and the others finally settled back into their stomachs, and their furrowed brows finally relaxed. This was especially true for Liu Baishuang. The heavy stone that had been hanging in her heart had finally been lifted, and a bright smile appeared on her beautiful face. "This is great. I knew that he would be fine." She was very emotional and murmured to herself. Although she had a smile on her face, her eyes could not help but be covered with tears. Jiu Jiu felt the same way and understood her feelings the most. She quickly held her arm and comforted her with a smile. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian could not help but look at each other and applaud excitedly. Taihao Yunqi, who was always gentle and elegant, also showed a gratified smile, looking handsome and sunny. In short, the 30-odd martial sages present were all shocked by this news and were discussing it endlessly. Only Yuan Zhen stood there expressionlessly, silently waiting for Ji Tianqing to return. Making up a lie and announcing that Ji Tianqing was still alive was only the first step. When Ji Tianqing returned, he still had 3 things to do. At that time, it would be the most difficult and humiliating moment for him. Chapter 22:16. In the Void. The ethereal star core that was originally 20,000 miles long had shrunk by almost 100 times. However, the dark star core was still embedded in the golden light barrier. After being refined by Ji Tianqing for half a day, it was only 200 miles long. The dust and gravel on the surface of the star core had long been pushed out and scattered in the dark void. After the ethereal star core had shrunk by 100 times, its texture had become unusually hard. The surface of the rock was even darker, with a cold metallic luster and a layer of hazy starlight. Ji Tianqing then ended the spell and removed the Sumeru mustard formation. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his left hand, while his right hand shot out a dazzling golden light that turned into a dragon claw that covered the sky and grabbed the ethereal star core. Then, he pulled the ethereal star core out of the void crack bit by bit. Swoosh! In a flash of golden light, the ethereal star core was put into the sword world and placed under a mountain near peaceful Soil City. He gave the Golden Mountain King a few instructions before closing the entrance of the Sword World. Phew! It's finally done. After successfully extracting the ethereal star core, he looked relieved and let out a long breath. The Sword of Burial of Heaven said with relief, "With this ethereal star core, I don't have to worry about advancing to virtual god level. Let's go, we shouldn't stay here for long. We should go back." Ji Tianqing nodded and flew toward the void crack with the sword of burial of heaven in his hand. Without the ethereal star core blocking the void crack, the golden light barrier was quickly repairing the gap and the void crack was quickly closing. In at most 2 hours, the huge crack in the void would disappear. Ji Tianqing would have to look for another entrance if he wanted to enter the void crack again. Swoosh! In a flash of black light, he entered the void crack at lightning speed and disappeared into the darkness. The next moment, he was back in the abyss under the Broken Soul Cliff. The Broken Soul Cliff was located in the 100,000 mountains and the Luoshui God Nation was hundreds of thousands of miles to the south. Ji Tianqing was wondering if he should go back to the Luoshui God Nation first. At this moment, a dense stream of light descended from the sky and landed in his palm. After the flowing light dissipated, a light blue ice crystal jade slip appeared. The design of the jade slip was simple and dignified. It was engraved with icicles and emitted a mysterious aura. Ji Tianqing frowned as he sized it up. He couldn't help but mutter, "A communication jade slip from Luo Shui?" A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. He released his divine sense to invade the jade slip and read the information in it. After a while, he put away the communication jade slip and frowned even more doubtfully. Burial of Heaven saw his strange expression and asked, "What's wrong? Why is Luo Shui looking for you?" Ji Tianqing answered truthfully, "Luo Shui sent me a message, telling me to hurry back to Sky City and make a trip to the Void Stage." "Return to Gazing Heaven City?" Burial of Heaven was stunned for a moment and was also full of doubts. Yuan Zhen and martial god Tianju have shed all pretense of cordiality with you. They are determined to kill you. At such a critical moment, aren't you walking into a trap if you return to Gazing Heaven City? Ji Tianxing shook his head and explained, Luo Shui said that Yuan Zhen will recognize my first ranking, give me a reward, and apologize to me in public. Burial of Heaven's tone was a little surprised. After thinking for a moment, he came to a realization and said, It seems that the result is as I expected. Martial god Tianju's clone was defeated by Luo Shui. This must be the result of the negotiation between Luo Shui and Tianju. Ji Tianxing also understood this point. He nodded and said, Yes, Luo Shui's true body came in person. Naturally, victory is in her hands. I reckon that not only did she defeat Tianju's clone, but she also used him as a hostage in exchange for this result. There's no time to lose. I'll rush back to Gazing Heaven City first. After all, I went to participate in the sacred assembly for that wind-fire divine pearl. With that, Ji Tianxing activated the small golden pagoda in his mind. He activated his majestic magic power and injected it into the mysterious golden pagoda. Immediately, the golden pagoda emitted a dazzling golden light that enveloped his entire body. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared on the spot. The bottom of the abyss returned to its cold darkness as if nothing had happened. In the next moment, Ji Tianxing's eyes regained light. He opened his eyes and saw a tall altar under his feet. The ground was engraved with the Origin Divine Array. Around the Divine Array, there were 18 demon god statues of different shapes and sizes. The altar was in the middle of a spacious hall. The hall was brightly lit, but it was cold and deathly silent. Ji Tianxing was no stranger to all of this. He knew that this was the interior of Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower, the 5th level of the Divine Tower. After calming himself down, he activated the Origin Divine Array. Swoosh! The array emitted a sacred golden light and condensed into a door of light in front of him. He stepped into the door of light without hesitation and his figure disappeared with a swoosh. In the next moment, he left Jiutian 10 Absolute's Tower and appeared at the peak of a mountain. It was evening and the sun was about to set. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the mountain, and the surroundings were indescribably bleak and desolate. Ji Tianxing knew at a glance that the mountain under his feet was the former entrance to the Yin-Yang secret realm. This place was located in the north of the Divine Ruins. If he flew south, he would reach the Heaven Absolute Divine Nation. He knew that time was of the essence, so he did not waste any more time. He hurriedly controlled the sword of Burial of Heaven and flew south as fast as he could. For 4 days and 4 nights, he did not stop for a moment and did not relax at all. Even though he had used up a lot of his magic power and was very tired, he did not want to stop and rest. He knew that he had to hurry to Sky City and end this crisis. The longer he delayed, the more likely it was that something unexpected would happen. On the morning of the 5th day, he finally arrived at Sky City. The sun had just risen, and golden sunlight scattered over the entire majestic city. Ji Tianxing flew across the sky at lightning speed, heading straight for the city square. Even from afar, he could see that the huge square was still crowded with people. However, compared to the scene of 700,000 warriors gathered at the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, the number of people now was at least half. Even so, Ji Tianxing was very surprised. He thought to himself, I have already wasted 7 days. Those warriors who came to watch the show are really patient. They have waited until now and are still not willing to disperse? As he muttered in his heart, he flew across the square like a flowing light and landed on the high platform in the middle of the square. At the same time, many warriors who were scattered on the square noticed him and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Everyone, look, who is that person? He seems to be Ji Tianxing?" It's really Ji Tianqing. It's him. It's just as the first prince said. Ji Tianqing is really still alive. This is unbelievable. He fell into the void and came back alive. It's a miracle. It's worth waiting patiently for so many days. He finally appeared. Many warriors cheered, waving their hands and shouting as they discussed excitedly. Ji Tianqing looked down at the crowd from above. He listened to the warriors' discussion and analyzed a lot of information from it. After a while, the array under his feet started to operate. Chapter 22:17. Seeing the golden teleportation door appear, everyone knew that it was Yuan Zhen who had activated the teleportation array. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and stepped into the portal expressionlessly, disappearing into thin air. In the next moment, he entered the void stage and appeared on the white light disk. Swoosh! The golden light dissipated and his figure appeared. On the disk, martial sages sat in a circle. Everyone sat cross-legged on the ground and closed their eyes to rest, looking bored to death. Sensing the fluctuation in space, everyone opened their eyes and looked at Ji Tianqing. Seeing that he had returned safely, other than looking a little tired, there were no injuries on his body. Everyone frowned in disbelief. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In an instant, more than 30 martial sages stood up and looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Only Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu and the rest were happy and went up to welcome him. "Young Master Ji, you're finally back." Lu Baishuang was the first to rush up to him. She looked at him with bright eyes and greeted him excitedly. After that, she looked at Ji Tianqing from head to toe. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was unharmed, she was relieved. Then, Taihao Yunqi and Jiu Jiu came up to him and greeted him with a smile. "Tianqing, it's great that you're fine. Tianqing, welcome back safely. We've been waiting for you for a few days." Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian also squeezed over and greeted him excitedly, expressing their worries. Ji Tianqing felt everyone's concern and smiled. He cupped his fists and said, "I'm sorry for making everyone worried." Jiu Jiu giggled and glanced at Lu Baishuang, teasing, "Tianqing, we're fine, but Holy Emperor Baishuang has suffered a lot these days. She's the one who's worried the most." Lu Baishuang was embarrassed. She looked away and did not dare to look at Ji Tianqing directly. She quickly lowered her head. Ji Tianqing patted Jiu Jiu's head and said with a smile, "Jiu Jiu, when did you learn to tease people? Did you learn bad things from your seventh brother?" Taihao Yunqi quickly waved his hand and smiled. "Young Master Ji, this has nothing to do with me." Everyone immediately burst into laughter, and the atmosphere became much more relaxed. However, on the other side, Qing Shan, Chen Yu, Chaoying, and the others had displeased expressions, appearing to be very impatient. "Hey! Ji Tianqing, how can you let everyone wait for you for so many days? More than 30 martial saints have waited here for you for 7 days. Are you not even going to apologize?" There were some people who were worried about his life and death. I didn't expect him to not care at all. The martial sages of the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation looked at Ji Tianqing with displeasure and spoke in a sarcastic tone. Ji Tianqing, Lu Baishuang, and the others immediately stopped laughing. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at the young martial sages and said expressionlessly, "My life and death naturally have nothing to do with you. As for you all waiting here, that's not my request. What does it have to do with me?" Martial Saint Qing Shan immediately frowned and said angrily, "Ji Tianqing, how can you say that? You're simply unreasonable." Martial Saint Chen Yu also frowned and said angrily, "You're simply treating my kindness as malice. It's better for you to die in the void." Hearing such vicious words, Ji Tianqing, Taihao Yunqi, and the others' faces immediately turned cold. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was about to go crazy, Yuan Zhen, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Everyone, stop quarreling. This is all because of me. Now that Ji Tianqing has returned safely, I have something to announce." Yuan Zhen was expressionless and his tone was deep and solemn. Seeing this, everyone knew that there was something important and they all stopped talking. A few old martial sages and more than 20 young martial sages all looked at Yuan Zhen. Ji Tianxing also temporarily suppressed his anger and looked at Yuan Zhen with a frown. Yuan Zhen raised his right hand and raised a finger. He announced in a vigorous voice, "First, I want to announce the ranking of this divine martial sacred assembly. Yuan Chong died in an accident, but Ji Tianxing miraculously survived. Therefore, Ji Tianxing won this battle, and he should be ranked first." Hearing this result, many martial sages were astonished and started discussing among themselves. What's going on? His Highness announced that Ji Tianxing is ranked first? Didn't His Highness set the result before? Why did he change it today? But then again, this is reasonable. After all, Ji Tianxing is still alive. But isn't His Highness hostile to Ji Tianxing? Why did he make this decision? Yuan Zhen turned a deaf ear to the crowd's discussion and raised a second finger. The second matter is that the martial sages who made it to the top 5 have already received their due reward. Today, I have brought the reward for the first place and I will personally give it to Ji Tianxing. The martial sages of various countries were surprised again and started discussing in shock and confusion. Yuan Zhen was still expressionless and no one could tell what he was thinking. He slowly raised his left hand and took out a dark purple luxurious treasure box from his spatial ring. Then, he held the exquisite and luxurious treasure box with both hands and personally handed it to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing, the reward for the first place of the sacred assembly is in this treasure box. This is the reward you deserve. Please check it. Yuan Zhen's attitude was neither salty nor indifferent, neither servile nor overbearing. Even so, Marshal St. Qingshan, Chowing, Chen Yu and the others still felt that it was unbelievable and were even more confused. Ji Tianxing glanced at Yuan Zhen and reached out to take the treasure box. He opened it to check. There was a red and white pearl in the middle of the treasure box, and it was shining with a dazzling light. This pearl was only the size of a pigeon's egg, and it was crystal clear with red and white colors. The inside was red like fire, but the surface was wrapped in a layer of dense white light. The entire pearl seemed to have a life of its own as it exuded a vigorous aura that contained an extremely violent and dangerous aura. Ji Tianxing's eyes were fixed on the pearl, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. Not only was he excited, but his eyes were also filled with a strong sense of surprise. It's it! It's it! This wind and fire pearl is definitely the divine pearl that Yao Yao needs. He shouted excitedly in his heart and could not help but smile. He had seen Yun Yao's divine pearl many times and was very familiar with its appearance and aura. There was no way he would be wrong. At this moment, he only felt that all the danger and pain he had gone through was worth it. After a while, he suppressed his excitement and moved his eyes away from the wind and fire pearl to the ring beside it. It was just an ordinary spatial ring. But when he opened the ring and released his divine sense to explore it, he found that there were mountains of cultivation resources stored in the ring. All kinds of elixirs, talisman materials, spiritual stones and magic treasures were piled up into a few mountains. Chapter 22:18. Before the sacred assembly, Yuan Zhen had announced the rewards in front of everyone. The reward for the first place was 300 million cultivation resources and a mysterious gift. Now that he had gotten all the rewards, Ji Tianxing naturally accepted them. When he put the treasure box into his spatial ring, the martial sages in the crowd looked away reluctantly. Everyone's eyes were burning with envy and jealousy. When Ji Tianxing opened the treasure box, the wind-fire divine pearl gave off a mysterious and powerful aura that successfully shocked everyone. Most of the martial sages present were people who knew what was good for them. Just from the light and aura of the divine pearl, everyone could tell that it was a rare treasure. Unfortunately, such a rare treasure had fallen into the hands of Ji Tianxing. Other than envy and jealousy, there was nothing else they could do. They didn't even have the right to look at it. At this time, Yuan Zhen announced in a serious voice, "The third thing, I want everyone to be witnesses. I want to apologize to Ji Tianxing in front of everyone." Many martial sages were stunned when they heard this news. Everyone looked at each other, thinking that they had misheard. Especially martial sage Qing Shan, martial sage Chao Ying, and martial sage Chen Yu, who were shocked and confused. They couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, what's going on? Why are you apologizing to him?" "Your First Highness, what right does Ji Tianxing have to make you apologize? What did you do wrong? Why are you apologizing?" Apologizing in front of everyone had always been something that hurt one's self-esteem. Moreover, Yuan Zhen was the noble divine son. He was humiliated in front of everyone. The martial sages of the heaven and divine nation also felt ashamed and humiliated. In fact, it wasn't just these young martial sages who were confused. Even the veteran martial sages and the martial sages of the vast divine nation didn't know what was going on. Only Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and Jiu Jiu knew the reason and looked at Yuan Zhen coldly. Yuan Zhen looked at Ji Tianxing calmly, cupped his fists respectfully, and said in a serious tone, "I am the host of this sacred assembly, and I should be responsible for everything related to the sacred assembly. However, due to my negligence, an accident occurred in the void platform during the duel between you and Yuan Chong. You and Yuan Chong were swallowed by the void. Yuan Chong died on the spot and you were left stranded in the void with heavy injuries. I am responsible for causing such serious consequences. This is one of my crimes. After the incident, I didn't receive a painful lesson. I only cared about myself and didn't think of rescuing her in time. This was the second sin. Fortunately, Holy Emperor Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and Taihao Jiujiu reminded me, and at the request of the three martial sages, I brought people into the void to search. I'm even more thankful that the heavens are protecting you and that you didn't perish in the void. I was able to successfully find you and prevent you from making an even bigger mistake." After he finished speaking, Yuan Zhen bowed deeply towards Ji Tianxing and said in a sincere tone, "Yuan Zhen knows that he has committed a grave sin and has deeply disappointed young Master Ji and the martial saints. Therefore, Yuan Zhen sincerely apologizes to young Master Ji. I hope young Master Ji can be magnanimous and forgive Yuan Zhen's mistake." Yuan Zhen's sincere words and tone immediately made many martial sages respect him, especially the martial saints of the heaven and divine nation. Not only did they not feel humiliated, but they also looked proud. The crowd even discussed in secret. They were all very impressed by Yuan Zhen's magnanimity. The few veteran martial saints also smiled with gratification and nodded their heads in praise. Taihao Yunqi, Jiujiu, and Lu Baishuang also looked satisfied. The anger and dissatisfaction that had accumulated in their hearts also dissipated. It didn't matter why Yuan Zhen apologized in public. Now that he had taken action, it could be said that he knew his mistake and could change. Everyone thought that Ji Tianxing would not pursue the matter and that this matter would be over. However, what Yuan Zhen and the others didn't expect was that Ji Tianxing looked at Yuan Zhen with a mocking gaze and a cold smile. "Ha ha! Yuan Zhen, your acting is very good." While laughing coldly, Ji Tianxing even clapped his hands. The martial saint's expressions changed. Yuan Zhen also frowned, a trace of shame and anger flashed in his eyes. However, he immediately suppressed his anger and asked calmly, "May I ask young Master Ji, are you not satisfied with Yuan Zhen's apology?" Ji Tianxing sneered, "Do you think I should be satisfied? You seem to be sincerely apologizing, but in fact you are inverting right and wrong. You are completely shirking responsibility. When Yuan Chong and I fought in public, a void crack suddenly appeared in the void. You dare to say that it was an accident? This is clearly your scheme. You want to kill two birds with one stone and take the opportunity to get rid of me and Yuan Chong." Yuan Zhen's body suddenly shook. A trace of anger and killing intent flashed in his eyes. However, He endured it and quickly pretended to be innocent. He said with righteous indignation, "Slander! You are maliciously slandering me. Yuan Chong is my brother. How can I harm him?" Ji Tianqing sneered contemptuously. "Yes, Yuan Chong is your brother. However, he is also one of the successors of the Divine Master. His talent and comprehension are second only to yours. He is the most threatening divine son to you. Moreover, you hate me to the bone. In order to get rid of me, you did not hesitate to sacrifice Yuan Chang's life. Even if you brought Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord into the void, you would not let me go. You still wanted to kill me. Fortunately, I was strong enough to kill Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord. I also severely injured you. However, in the end, all my efforts were in vain. I let you escape." Ji Tianqing's words were like a bolt from the blue. Instantly, all the martial saints present were dumbfounded. Everyone widened their eyes in shock and looked at Ji Tianqing and Yuan Zhen in disbelief. For a moment, the white light disk was silent. The expressions of the more than 30 martial saints were very subtle and complicated. Even Yuan Zhen did not expect that Ji Tianqing would be so daring to tell the truth in front of everyone. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing and shouted angrily, "Ji Tianqing, are you crazy? You dare to say these words?" Ji Tianqing did not send a voice transmission. He asked in a cold voice, "You dare to do it? Why can't I dare to say it? What you should really apologize to me is because of this matter." Yuan Zhen was completely dumbfounded. He glared at Ji Tianqing. His mind was blank. Previously, he was wondering if Ji Tianqing had compromised with Divine Father and agreed to serve Tianju Divine Nation. But now, it seemed that was not the case. Yuan Zhen was confused. What was going on? Why could Ji Tianqing come back alive? Why did Divine Father personally issue an order for him to apologize to Ji Tianqing? Yuan Zhen could not figure it out. At this moment, a cold and dignified middle-aged man's voice sounded in his mind. "Yuan Zhen, why are you still in a daze? Don't argue with Ji Tianqing. Don't waste time with him. Quickly apologize to him." This voice was angry and anxious. Yuan Zhen was very familiar with it. His body suddenly shook as if he was struck by lightning. He revealed a look of disbelief. Chapter 22:19. Yuan Zhen had never thought that martial god Tianju would personally send him a voice transmission. He knew that martial god Tianju's real body was in seclusion in the Divine Kingdom. Usually, only one of his divine soul doppelgangers was in charge of government affairs and would not leave the Divine Kingdom. Now, it was most likely his divine soul doppelgangers who were secretly observing the void platform. Thinking of this, Yuan Zhen vaguely guessed something and suddenly had a bad feeling. "Father God, what happened to you? What the hell happened?" These thoughts appeared in his mind. He wanted to ask martial god Tianju with his divine sense, but he could not do so. Full of helplessness, he could only suppress the humiliation and anger and slowly looked up at Ji Tianqing. "Ji Tianqing, you. Enough. Ruthless." He stared at Ji Tianqing with fire shooting out of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, "I, Yuan Zhen, admit my defeat today. Ji Tianqing, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have schemed against you and I shouldn't have killed you." Yuan Zhen's voice was low and hoarse. It was as if he had used up all his strength and courage to shout these words. Then, without looking at Ji Tianqing, he turned around and walked to the center of the round plate. He just wanted to leave the void platform immediately. The surrounding martial sages were still in shock and astonishment. Many of them had not come to their senses and were still unwilling to believe Ji Tianqing's words. However, when they saw Yuan Zhen's reaction, they knew that Ji Tianqing was not lying. Indeed, Yuan Zhen had schemed against Ji Tianqing and Yuan Chong to kill two birds with one stone. Even after entering the void, he did not go to search for Ji Tianqing but to kill him. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing was strong enough to kill Qin Zheng and the sky-gazing city lord. Only then did he manage to escape. However, why did Yuan Zhen apologize to Ji Tianxing? This was the most puzzling thing to everyone. However, no matter what, Yuan Zhen had schemed against Ji Tianxing and even killed his fourth brother, Yuan Chong. This was basically a fact. Many martial sages' expressions changed. They no longer looked at Yuan Zhen with gratification and admiration. Instead, they looked at him with caution, disgust, contempt, and disdain. Especially Taihao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu, and Lu Baishuang. How could they let go of this opportunity to beat a dog in the water? I can't believe that the grand divine son of the heaven's divine nation is so vicious that he even wanted to kill his fourth brother. Taihao Yunqi shouted in shock. He stopped Yuan Zhen and asked him, Yuan Zhen, how can you be so narrow-minded and vicious to such an extent? Yuan Zhen was stopped by him. He immediately raised his head and glared at him with red eyes. He shouted angrily, What does it have to do with you? Get out of here! Jiu Jiu and Lu Baishuang also opened their mouths to denounce his evil deed. Zhen, I've long seen through your hypocritical and despicable true face. You've deceived so many people all these years. Now that the truth has been revealed and your sins have been exposed, shouldn't you repent? Despicable and shameless bastard. You insisted that it was an accident, but I refused to believe it. I didn't expect it to be so. Young Master Ji has no enmity with you. Why do you want to kill him? How can you be so vicious? Yuan Zhen's mind and consciousness were filled with doubt, confusion, and anger. He was about to lose his mind. Now that he was being questioned by Jiu Jiu and Lu Baishuang in front of everyone, he was enraged. Glaring at the two of them, he roared, You two bitches, if you dare to make any more noise, I'll kill you! He shouted coldly. His face was distorted and terrifying. His whole body was emitting a terrifying murderous intent. Jiu Jiu and Lu Baishuang were oppressed by the murderous intent. They took a few steps back with pale faces. The few young martial sages of the heaven's divine nation, who were closer to Yuan Zhen, also retreated in fear. In everyone's eyes, Yuan Zhen was no different from an angry mad dog. Everyone looked at Yuan Zhen with a complicated expression. They found it hard to believe that the once elegant and cultured eldest son of God would turn into such a ferocious person. Even Qing Shan, Chen Yu, and the martial sages of the heaven's divine nation were embarrassed and disappointed. They didn't dare to approach Yuan Zhen. Chao Ying had always admired Yuan Zhen. She was impressed by his talent and demeanor. But now, Chao Ying looked at Yuan Zhen with tears in her eyes. Her expression and eyes were a little dazed. Her mind was blank. She couldn't believe that Yuan Zhen, who was so outstanding that he was almost perfect, was just a hypocrite. He, who showed his true face, was so ferocious and terrifying. He was cruel and vicious. Silently, something in Chao Ying's heart was broken. 2 drops of tears fell from the corners of her eyes and silently streaked across her face. Swoosh! Yuan Zhen, who was almost crazy, rushed into the golden door as if he was escaping. His figure immediately disappeared. The white light disk was still silent. Many martial sages looked at each other and shook their heads with regret. They couldn't help but sigh. No one could believe that things had turned out like this. Yuan Chong was dead. Yuan Zhen was almost crazy and lost his reputation. And the biggest winner was undoubtedly Ji Tianxing. Not only did he win first place and obtain the most mysterious rare treasure, he also humiliated Yuan Zhen in front of everyone. Many young martial sages didn't dare to look at him directly. They only dared to glance at him secretly. There was a hint of fear in everyone's eyes. After this incident, none of the martial sacred realm experts present would dare to provoke him. Even the noble and powerful first divine son, Yuan Zhen, had been defeated by him. Who would dare to seek death? After everyone was silent for a while, Xingshan martial sage stroked his beard and sighed with a complicated expression. He was the first to leave with Chowing. Then, Wenren Jiusheng, Yunshao Palace Master, Granny Yulong, and the others stepped into the golden teleportation door. Lu Baishuang quietly pulled Ji Tianxing's sleeve and whispered, "Young Master Ji, we can't stay here for long. Let's go." Ji Tianxing nodded. He looked up at the void with deep meaning and nodded slightly in a certain direction. Then, he left with Lu Baishuang and the others. Of course, Qing Shan, Chen Yu, and the other young martial sages watched him leave coldly. There was a hint of hatred in their eyes. After this incident, the martial sages of Heaven End hated and feared Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! In a flash, Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and the others appeared in the square in the city. They stood in two groups and cupped their fists to each other and said goodbye to each other. Taihao Yunqi looked at Ji Tianxing and said sincerely, "Tianxing, after this incident, you and Heaven End Divine Nation are like fire and water. You have to be careful." Jiu looked at him with burning eyes and said, "Yuan Zhen's evil deeds have been exposed by you. He will definitely lose his reputation. He will definitely hate you and will not let this go." Ji Tianxing nodded and cupped his fists to return the greeting. "Yunqi Jiu, thank you for your concern. However, I have already made preparations and plans. You don't have to worry." Taihao Yunqi nodded slightly and said with a smile, "If that's the case, then we will take our leave. If you have the chance in the future, remember to visit us at Mount God Bestowment." Chapter 22-20. Taihao Yunqi left with Jiu. The young martial saints of the vast divine kingdom also left one after another. Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, and the others didn't stay in Sky City either. Under the gaze of hundreds of thousands of martial artists, they flew across the sky and soon disappeared into the horizon. Since he had obtained the Wind-Fire Divine Pearl, Ji Tianxing naturally had to return to Luotian Mountain and give it to Yunyao as soon as possible. On the void platform, the remaining martial saints all left. After a while, the white light disk was empty and returned to silence. Then, the golden light portal also disappeared. In the alternate space, martial god Luo Shui held Tianju's clone and watched everything calmly. The highly anticipated Divine Martial Sacred Assembly had finally ended, although there were many twists and turns in the process. Fortunately, the result was as martial god Luo Shui had expected. Tianju's clone struggled a few times but couldn't break free from martial god Luo Shui's grasp. His face was as cold as ice as he gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Luo Shui! It's over and I've fulfilled my promise. Why don't you let me go? I've tolerated you to the extreme, and you even ruined my son Yuan Zhen's reputation. If you dare to break the promise, I won't forgive you." Martial god Luo Shui didn't intend to let him go. He said indifferently, "You did have a good intention when you held the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Therefore, I don't object to the martial saints of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom participating. Unfortunately, after thousands of years, the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly has become dirty and shady, and it has become a tool for you to win over the martial saints of various races. Even your sons have imitated your despicable shamelessness. Now you and your sons have only yourselves to blame for ending up like this." Tianju's clone clenched his teeth, and his face darkened with anger. His eyes were scarlet red. Surging murderous aura accumulated in his chest, ready to explode at any moment. He was extremely angry and secretly swore that after this, he would take revenge 100-fold. No matter the price, he would kill Ji Tianxing and martial god Luo Shui and flatten the entire Luo Shui Divine Kingdom. However, he could only endure for now and escape first. Luo Shui martial god stared at the sky and said indifferently, "Tianjue, I know what you're thinking. Your clone was captured by me and threatened by me to make such a humiliating decision. With your personality, you would never let me and Ji Tianxing go. You even wanted to destroy the Luo Shui Divine Nation. Don't deny it. If you don't have these thoughts, then you wouldn't be you." Tianju's clone's body stiffened, and he had a bad premonition. He asked cautiously, "Luo Shui? What do you mean? What do you want?" Luo Shui, martial god, looked down at him and said coldly, "The world has always known me as the most gentle and kind god master. Other than being aloof and pure, he seemed to have no ambition or domineering means. But today, I'm sorry, you must die." Her tone was calm and indifferent, without any hatred or anger, but it made Tianju's doppelganger feel cold from the bottom of his heart. His expression instantly changed as he cursed out in rage, "Luo Shui! You bitch, you actually want to break the contract? Are you crazy? You have to think clearly. Once you destroy this clone of mine, we'll be mortal enemies." Luo Shui, martial god, looked at him indifferently and asked back, "Even if I don't destroy your clone, aren't we enemies? Could it be that you will fulfill your promise and not attack Ji Tianxing again? At our level, we don't have to lie and deceive each other." Tianju's clone trembled with anger, his eyes spitting fire as he roared, "Luo Shui! I think you're really crazy. In order to protect Ji Tianxing, you actually disregarded the consequences. You'll definitely regret it. Even if you destroy my clone, it won't affect anything. The day my real body comes out of seclusion will be the day you die." Luo Shui, martial god, chuckled and said indifferently, "If I destroy your clone, at least you won't be able to hurt him for the time being. Even if you succeed and your real body comes out of seclusion, it will be 20 years later. At that time, I'm afraid the situation will be different." Tianju's clone was completely dumbfounded. His eyes widened, revealing monstrous hatred, and he roared hysterically, "Luo Shui, you crazy woman! You're simply unreasonable. In order to protect him for 20 years, you actually disregarded the contract and didn't hesitate to become mortal enemies with me. You wait, one day I'll make you kneel down and repent." Luo Shui, martial god, glanced at him and said in a cold tone, "Then you can look forward to that day." Then, her right palm lit up with dazzling icy blue brilliance, condensing into a huge seal, enveloping Tianju's clone and crushing him fiercely. The seal was made up of hundreds of ancient seal characters, and it contained extraordinary power. Tianju's clone was already seriously injured. How could he resist Luo Shui, martial god's full suppression? Cracking sounds could be heard as Tianju's doppelganger continued to crumble. His power was also rapidly dissipating. "Ah! Luo Shui, I'll definitely kill you, definitely!" Before completely collapsing, Tianju's clone roared furiously, and his voice shook the heavens. After 10 breaths, he completely collapsed, turning into billions of starlight spots. Immediately after, the icy blue seal dispersed the light spots as well. Tianju's clone completely disappeared and no longer existed. Only then did Luo Shui, martial god, retract her palm, turn around, and step into the void, leaving silently. Although the divine martial sacred assembly had ended and all the experts had left one after another, the more than 300,000 martial artists in the square, after discussing for a while, also left one after another. However, at this moment, an explosive piece of news spread throughout the square. Previously, when Ji Tianxing and Yuan Chong fought on the void platform, the accident that suddenly happened was actually not an accident. The huge void crack and the terrifying void storm were all deliberately designed by eldest divine son Yuan Zhen. The reason why Yuan Zhen did this was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, killing Ji Tianxing and Yuan Chong at the same time. Ji Tianxing had a grudge with him, and Yuan Chong was also the divine son who was the most threatening to him, so he was so ruthless. Yuan Chong died on the spot, and Ji Tianxing was wandering in the void, his whereabouts unknown. Therefore, Yuan Zhen brought the Divine Guard's supervisor Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord personally into the void to kill them all. However, Ji Tianxing's strength was strong. He killed Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord, and even seriously injured Yuan Zhen. Just now, Yuan Zhen apologized and repented to Ji Tianxing in front of all the martial sages on the void platform. This sudden news instantly exploded in the square and quickly spread throughout Wangtian City. Everyone found it hard to believe. How could the noble and elegant eldest divine son Yuan Zhen be such a sinister and despicable villain? But this news was absolutely true, and all the martial sages present could prove it. For a time, the entire Sky City was in an uproar. Everyone was immersed in shock, crazily discussing and spreading this matter. Chapter 22-21. Half a month later, Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, Zhuo Mingqi, Mu Changtian, and the others returned to Luoshui God Nation. The four of them looked travel-worn. After returning to Luoshui God Nation, the four of them went their separate ways. Lu Baishuang and the others returned to their respective empires. Ji Tianxing went straight to Luotian Mountain. 3 days later, he finally returned to Luotian Mountain in the evening. Under the faint golden sunset, Luotian Mountain was as tranquil and ethereal as usual. White clouds wrapped around the mountain peak. Flocks of birds and spirit beasts danced around the mountain peak. The many buildings and palaces on the mountain peak were also shining faintly. Ji Tianxing landed on the square on the mountain peak. Many guards and disciples saw him and immediately bowed. He did not waste any time and went straight to Grandma Long's residence to report. Half an hour later, he met Granny Long in her study. Grandma Long was handling official business. She seemed to be in a good mood. There was even a faint smile on her lips. Hearing the footsteps, she quickly put down the memorial in her hand and turned to look at Ji Tianxing at the door. "Tianxing, you're finally back." Grandma Long's old face showed a sincere smile. She stood up and welcomed him with a heart full of gratification. Ji Tianxing nodded at her and greeted her. He sat down in front of her. Grandma Long ordered a maid to make tea. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and said, "Tianxing, when you went to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, I was worried every day. I've already heard about what happened in Wangtian City from the spies. I did not expect that you would encounter so many troubles and twists in Sky View City this time. Fortunately, you turned the misfortune into a blessing. Everything was easily resolved. Not only that, you also took first place in the Sacred Assembly and ruined that damn Yuan Zhen's reputation. Now, Yuan Zhen's ugly deeds have already spread across the entire continent." Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. "Since Grandma already knew about it, I won't say more." Just as Granny had expected, the pearl that martial god Tianju had obtained in the heavenly wind-fire layer was the wind-fire divine pearl that Yao Yao needed. "I've already brought the god orb back. I'll go look for Yao Yao later." Granny Long's smile grew brighter as she nodded and said, "That's great. Now that you can get the flaming wind divine bead, all the danger and suffering you went through before will be worth it. Oh right, Yun Yao's strength has improved recently. In the month after you left, she went through another heavenly tribulation and is now at the 8th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. With the Wind-Fire Deity Pearl, her breakthrough to the Martial Sage realm is almost guaranteed. It's just a matter of time." Ji Tianxing was also deeply surprised and said in disbelief, "Yao Yao's strength has increased so quickly? Looks like the power of the Divine Pearl is indeed terrifying." Granny Long smiled and said, "All right, I'm already very grateful that you came to report to me right away after a long journey. Don't waste time. Go back and see Yun Yao. Although she has been cultivating in seclusion, she knows that you participated in the sacred assembly. She is very worried about you." Ji Tianxing nodded and was about to get up and leave. However, he suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but ask, "Granny, did the Divine Master come out of seclusion long ago?" Granny Long was stunned for a moment. She looked at him deeply and nodded. "That's right. When you went to Wangtian City, the Divine Master had already come out of seclusion." Ji Tianxing thought to himself and asked doubtfully, "The Divine Master coming out of seclusion is such a big thing. How could there be no news at all?" Granny Long revealed a meaningful smile and explained, "The Divine Master's wisdom is incomparable to ordinary people." She already knew that the current situation was complicated, so she deliberately hid the news. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment and asked again, "Then, has the Divine Master come back? Did she say anything?" Granny Long didn't hide and answered honestly, 10 days ago, the Divine Master returned to the Divine Kingdom. She did say something to me. The Divine Master said to let you cultivate in peace and take care of your own affairs. You don't need to worry about the Divine Kingdom of Tianju." Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment and immediately guessed something. He couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. Of course she knows that martial god Tianju and I are like fire and water. He will definitely take revenge. Since she said this, it means that she has already taken care of the future trouble. She won't let martial god Tianju threaten me. Could it be that, after she threatened martial god Tianju, she still destroyed his divine soul avatar? It's hard to believe that she changed her gentle nature and acted so decisively. Ji Tianqing thought silently and his heart was filled with many emotions. After he came back to his senses, he bowed to Granny Long and left the study. Not long after, he returned to the Cloud Water Palace. Golden Dragon, who was guarding the door, quickly bowed to greet him. When he entered the living room, Black Eagle also came to greet him. After a few words of concern, he wanted to help him bathe and change his clothes. After all, he looked travel-worn and was not in good spirits. Ji Tianqing declined Black Eagle's kindness and entered Yun Yao's secret room alone. In the secret room full of spiritual energy, Yun Yao was sitting cross-legged on a futon made of supreme-grade spiritual jade. She closed her eyes and cultivated. After not seeing her for more than 20 days, her strength and aura had indeed increased by several times. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to check and found that she had really reached the 8th level of the Crossing Calamity Realm and was trying to break through to the 9th level. He slowed down his pace and walked to Yun Yao and sat down in front of her. He didn't want to wake her up. However, Yun Yao didn't enter a deep level of cultivation and immediately sensed his aura. She opened her eyes and looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had returned safely, she heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She revealed a gratified look and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. "Tianqing, you're finally back. This time, you went to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly and went through so many twists and turns. It's great that you can return safely." Ji Tianqing's spirit also relaxed. He naturally revealed a gentle smile and stretched out his hand to hold Yun Yao's hands. When he was wandering outside, no matter what he experienced, his spirit was always tense. He had to remain calm and vigilant at all times. Only when he was reunited with Yun Yao and his child could his mind truly relax. No matter how many trials and tribulations he went through, as long as he saw his wife and child safe, everything was worth it. He looked at Yun Yao with a gentle gaze and said in a gentle voice, "Yao Yao, the pearl that martial god Tianju obtained in the heavenly wind and fire layer was indeed a wind and fire divine pearl. Although he was a martial god, he also misjudged and didn't understand the true profundity of the wind and fire divine pearl. Although there were some twists and turns in the process, I still brought this divine pearl back in the end." As he spoke, he took out a treasure box from his space ring and took out the wind and fire divine pearl. He handed it to Yun Yao. The divine pearl was only the size of a pigeon's egg, but it was as heavy as a mountain. It contained the power of the heavenly wind and heavenly fire that could destroy the heavens and earth. It emitted an extremely violent aura. Chapter 22:22. Yun Yao stared at the wind-fire deity pearl. She was excited and her eyes sparkled. She reached out and took the deity pearl. She held it in her palm and looked at it intently. "This is indeed one of the deity pearls that I need. The wind-fire deity pearl is even stronger than the earth spiritual pearl. This is great. With this wind-fire deity pearl, I am confident that I will be able to break through to the martial sage realm. Even the glazed fire dragon will be able to break through to the martial sage realm with the help of this deity pearl." At this point, Yunyao looked at Ji Tianxing with a face full of gratitude. Her voice was slightly choked as she said, "Husband, thank you. You have done so much for me, but I can't do anything to help you." Ji Tianxing patted her hand and gestured for her to keep the wind-fire deity pearl. He smiled and comforted her. "Since we are husband and wife, there is no need to thank me. Now that you are pregnant, you can give birth to Chen Chen and Yiya. Nurturing and teaching them is already the greatest contribution you can make." When the two children were mentioned, a happy smile appeared on Yunyao's face. She lowered her head to look at her slightly swollen belly and said in a gentle voice, "Chen Chen and Ye are both very smart and sensible. Before they were even born, they already had extraordinary strength. Their talent is rare in the world. It is also our fortune to have two such outstanding children in this life." When she spoke of the two children, Yun Yao was proud of them. She was radiating a motherly glow. Ji Tianxing felt the same way. He reached out and caressed her belly. He smiled and said, "I wonder when the two children will be born?" Yun Yao thought for a while and smiled. She shook her head and said, "From the looks of it, it will take a few more years." "So long?" Ji Tianxing was surprised. He smiled and said, "Don't you want to see your parents sooner?" Chen Chen and Yiya were sleeping and did not seem to hear him. Naturally, they did not reply. Ji Tianxing chatted with Yun Yao for a while before he got up to leave. "Yao Yao, quickly refine the wind-fire deity pearl and break through to the martial sage realm. I will not delay your cultivation any further. I still have some matters to attend to and need to rush back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I won't stay to accompany you. When I'm done with my business, I'll come back to see you." Yun Yao nodded and comforted him softly. "Husband, go ahead and do your work. You don't have to worry about me. Now that the chaos of the demon race has been quelled and the situation on the continent is stable, you have to seize the time to cultivate." Ji Tianxing patiently listened to her advice, then got up and left the secret room. After resting for a day in the Cloud Water Palace, he left the Luotian Mountain alone the next morning and rushed towards the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He did not lie when he told Yun Yao that he needed to return to Tianzhu Mountain. He really did have something to do. The illusory spirit star nucleus that he had previously absorbed was still stored in the Sword World. He had to send the ethereal star nucleus back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains as soon as possible and put it into the Star Divine Furnace for smelting. According to his estimation, it would take at least a few years for the star nucleus to be smelted in the Star Divine Furnace before it could be used. At that time, he would be able to use the ethereal star nucleus to smelt the Burial of Heaven sword and improve the quality of the Burial of Heaven sword. Ji Tianxing rushed at full speed and arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains 2 days later. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was still the holy land of martial arts with abundant spiritual energy. The entire holy mountain was peaceful. Ji Tianxing flew to the top of the mountain and looked down at the entire holy mountain and the training ground. Many of the houses and palaces had not changed, and the training grounds were still clean and tidy. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the number of disciples and guards living on the mountain peak seemed to have increased. Obviously, the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was very good and it was developing rapidly. Ji Tianxing was deeply gratified and landed in front of the gate of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. When the guards on both sides of the gate saw his return, they hurriedly knelt down and bowed respectfully. Ji Tianxing nodded with satisfaction and signaled the guards to dispense with the formalities. Then, he looked at the captain of the guards and asked, "Where is Huang Longren?" The captain of the guards hurriedly replied, reporting to young Master Ji, "The great immortal brought 2 elders to patrol the sect and the city yesterday. According to the usual practice, the great immortal will return by tomorrow evening at the latest." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and signaled the captain of the guards to leave. He instructed, when he returns, send someone to report the news. I have something to ask him. After saying that, he stepped into the pillar of heaven's mountains and returned to his residence. There were guards guarding the inside and outside of the room, and there were maids who cleaned the room until it was spotless. Ji Bai and Shohei were not there. Obviously, they followed his last order and did not continue to guard here. Ji Tianqing passed through the room of his residence and went straight into the secret room. He opened the secret passage in the corner of the secret room and flew down the passage, entering the divine star furnace. The huge divine star furnace had long been filled with endless divine star fire. What he saw was a silver sea, the turbulent sea of fire rolling endlessly, exuding a terrifying heat. Ji Tianqing was in the turbulent sea of fire, but it was as comfortable as soaking in a hot spring, indescribably comfortable. Originally, he was mentally exhausted and travel-worn. After soaking in the divine star fire for a while, he became energetic and full of energy. Even the hidden diseases and minor injuries on his body were quickly healed by the power of the stars. He crossed the turbulent sea of fire and came to the corner of the divine star furnace to check on Qian Yu and the Black Dragon. Qian Yu and the Black Dragon's strength had greatly improved and improved. Especially the Black Dragon, after being tempered thousands of times in the divine star furnace, the dragon's body had long been incomparably strong and was no longer riddled with scars. It had already cultivated the star transformation art to great success and could smoothly devour the power of the stars. Qian Yu still had a leisurely look, relying on the protection of the divine artifact. It was resting with its eyes closed. When Ji Tianqing approached it, it immediately woke up, opened its silver eyes, and looked at Ji Tianqing with bright eyes. "Old Ji, why are you back?" Qian Yu got up and flew in front of Ji Tianqing excitedly and asked, "You left us here and let us cultivate in seclusion for a few years. Why didn't you come to see us?" As it spoke, it stretched out its claws and pointed at the black dragon in the corner, and said pitifully, "Look at that dumb dragon. After cultivating in the divine star furnace for a few years, it has long been burnt black like charcoal, covered in cuts and bruises, and on the verge of death." Ji Tianqing looked at Qian Yu with a faint smile, and stretched out his hand to knock on its head, and said jokingly, "Don't complain to me, the black dragon is already as black as charcoal. How could it be burnt? Besides, it is strong enough now, and can already withstand the tempering of the divine star fire. What are you trying to do by acting pitiful in front of me?" Qian Yu rolled its eyes and said pitifully, "Old Ji, the dumb dragon and I are strong enough. There is not much point in continuing to stay in the divine star furnace. Why don't we leave the furnace and go out with you, and help you solve your problems?" Chapter 22-23. Qian Yu was seen through by Ji Tianqing, but it didn't feel embarrassed. It hugged Ji Tianqing's arm and didn't let go, pretending to be pitiful and begging. "Old Ji, you once said that cultivating in seclusion can't help us achieve the divine art, let alone advance by leaps and bounds. Only by practicing in real battles can we grow quickly. We have built the foundation. Now we need to take risks and fight in real battles." Ji Tianqing couldn't stand its coaxing and pestering. He nodded and said, "Okay, you continue to cultivate. I still have things to do. When I need to go out, I will take you out." Qian Yu's wish was fulfilled. It let go of Shi Yan's arm and said with a smile, "Okay, old Ji, you have to keep your promise." Ji Tianqing didn't care about it anymore. He turned around and flew to the depths of the star divine furnace, landing on the Tenjiang Tall star torch. He looked around and frowned. The star divine furnace is only 100 miles wide. The illusory spirit star nucleus has been shrunk 100 times, but it's still 200 miles long. How can I put it in the furnace? The illusory spirit star nucleus was twice as big as the star divine furnace. If he didn't use some tricks, he couldn't put it in, let alone smelt it. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a while. Then, he came up with a solution. The star divine furnace wasn't a real furnace. It was a super formation. He just needed to slightly change the structure of the formation to double the size of the star divine furnace. Therefore, he hurriedly cast a spell, forming white formation seals and injecting them into the star torch. He busied himself for 6 hours and cast more than 20,000 seals before he finally managed to change the structure of the formation. The star divine furnace, which was filled by the star flame, quickly expanded to more than 200 miles wide. In this way, the illusory spirit star nucleus could be put in. However, the star flame that filled the entire furnace could only fill half of it now. Ji Tianxing took out the sword of burial of heaven, opened the sword world, and used the capturing technique to take out the huge illusory spirit star nucleus. Swoosh! The 200-mile-long diamond-shaped star nucleus appeared in the star divine furnace. This stone, which was as black as ink, directly filled the star divine furnace. The surging star divine flame was also forced to spread out, stirring up terrifying waves. Black Dragon and Qianyu, who were cultivating in the Sea of Fire, were awakened by the huge wave. Both of them flew to Ji Tianxing's side and asked him about the situation. "Old Ji, what are you doing? Wow, such a big piece of ore? That's not right. It doesn't look like an ore, but a meteorite." Qianyu and He Long stared at the ethereal star nucleus with curious and surprised expressions. Ji Tianxing glanced at them and immediately came up with an idea. With a serious face, he said, "This is a star crystal core I got from outer space. This was no ordinary meteorite. Instead, it was the crystallization of a star. Not only was it tough and powerful, but it also contained the power of the entire star. The two of you have been cultivating in the star divine furnace for a few years. If you continue to absorb the star divine fire, your progress will not be obvious enough. Therefore, from now on, the two of you will control the star divine fire to refine this star core. The energy from the star core will help you to increase your strength quickly." The black dragon's eyes lit up and he nodded his head excitedly. "That's great. I can feel that my strength has been increasing at a slower speed recently. I don't know when I will be able to break through. I didn't expect old Ji to get a star core. This is amazing. With this star core, my strength will increase by leaps and bounds. Maybe in less than 2 years, I will be able to break through to the martial sage realm." The black dragon said excitedly. He could not help but stretch out his dragon claws and touch the black star core. Qianyu was suspicious. He looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "Old Ji, why do I feel that there is a trick? You are definitely not helping us to increase our strength. In my opinion, you most likely want us to be your coolies and help you refine this star core, right?" "Humph! Damn little fox!" Ji Tianxing scolded in his heart. However, he did not admit it and quickly shook his head to deny it. "Qianyu, do I look like that kind of person to you? Do I look like that kind of person?" Qianyu nodded his head and said firmly, "You don't look like that kind of person. You are." Ji Tianxing could not help but roll his eyes at Qianyu and said, "No matter what you think, this is a task that I have given you. You must complete it. When the two of you are able to refine this star core into a silvery white crystal, the task will be completed." The black dragon did not think much of it and nodded his head in agreement. He then flew around the star core and examined it carefully. Qianyu looked at Ji Tianxing warily and asked, "Old Ji, we can complete this task, but you have to tell me, how long will it take?" Ji Tianxing smirked and said casually, 7 to 8 years at most. 2 to 3 years at least." "What?" Qianyu's expression changed and he looked like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He jumped in front of Ji Tianxing and threw a tantrum. "Old Ji, you detestable liar. You just promised me that you would bring me out to explore the world. You forgot your promise in the blink of an eye and now you want me to work for you for 7 to 8 years? Old Ji, I advise you to be kinder. Otherwise, I will tell Yunyao that you cheated me and the Black Dragon and exploited us. Ji Tianxing was not angry or anxious. He smiled and held Qian Yu's claws. Don't be anxious. 7 to 8 years is the longest time. I will teach you a skill to refine this star core and increase your strength at the same time. As long as you do not slack off and work hard, I guarantee that you will complete the task in 3 years. Furthermore, you will break through to the martial sage realm within 3 years. When the little black dragon heard this, he immediately became spirited and expectantly asked, Old Ji, is what you said true? What skill is it? Teach me. Qian Yu could not help but glare at him and scold him. Stupid dragon, can you be any more stupid? You still have to stay here for 3 years. Don't you want to go to the Luotian mountain and see your fiancé, Azure? The black dragon was stunned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, It's only 3 years. If I can break through to the martial sage realm, it will be worth it. As for Azure, when did she become my fiancé? I haven't seen her for a few years, and I have almost forgotten what she looks like. Furthermore, I have already thought about it. I will only go out to explore the world when I reach the martial sage realm. I don't want to be bullied and embarrass old Ji. You! Qian Yu was choked by the black dragon's words. He was so angry that he could only stare, but there was nothing he could do. Ji Tianxing smiled and patted his head. Qian Yu, you have to understand my good intentions. I am doing this for your own good. Cultivate well. I will wait for the day when you break through to the martial sage realm. Chapter 22-24. The 2 balls of dazzling white light contained a vast amount of information and recorded a skill art. The dazzling light entered Qian Yu and the Black Dragon's minds and immediately released a vast amount of information. Both of them were dizzy from the shock and quickly closed their eyes. They obediently lay on the star nucleus and silently refined it. Ji Tianxing revealed a wisp of a satisfied smile when he saw this scene, and then he turned around and left the stellar divine furnace. He believed that with Qian Yu and the Black Dragon's strength, as long as they mastered the skill art, they would be able to refine the star nucleus in 2 years. Moreover, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds and they would break through to the martial sage realm. After leaving the star divine furnace, Ji Tianxing returned to the secret chamber. He sat alone in the middle of the secret chamber and waved his hand to activate the array of the secret chamber. Instantly, the secret chamber was filled with spiritual energy. In his mind, the voice of the burial of heaven rang. I know that you want to refine the star nucleus as soon as possible and help me reach the empty God ring. However, this is not something that can be done in 2 to 3 years. Why did you lie to those 2? That little fox is very cunning. Aren't you afraid that it will resent you? Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. He explained, Actually, I did not lie to them. I did it for their own good. Although there are many conditions to upgrade you to a divine weapon, and refining the star nucleus is only one of them. However, what I can do now is to fulfill the conditions that I have. The current situation seems calm, but I have a bad premonition that there will be even greater turmoil in the future. Qian Yu and the Black Dragon will not benefit much from following me. Instead, they will delay the best time to cultivate. Now, the most important thing for them to do is to cultivate diligently and increase their strength. At this point, Ji Tianxing added, Of course, it's the same for me. I will also be cultivating in seclusion for a period of time. The burial of heaven guessed his thoughts and asked in a low voice, Are you referring to the Heaven End God Nation and the North Underworld Mountain? You and the demon tribe are irreconcilable enemies. Now you are also enemies with the Heaven End God Nation. If you do not improve your strength quickly, I am afraid that it will be difficult to deal with the revenge of these 2 forces. Ji Tianxing nodded and didn't say anything else. Actually, there was another thought in his mind, but he didn't say it out loud. That thought was about Yu and the non-human kind, but it was still vague. He wasn't sure. 10 breaths later, the secret chamber was completely quiet. Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and formed a series of hand seals to cultivate the 7th level of the Sword Soul Dao. A day and a night passed. On the morning of the 3rd day, Huanglong Daoist came to the door of the secret chamber and asked to see Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing temporarily ended his cultivation and summoned the Huanglong Daoist to the secret chamber. Huanglong Daoist bowed respectfully and said with a smile, "Greetings, Master. Congratulations on becoming the champion of the Sacred Assembly and becoming famous throughout the world." Without a doubt, the Huanglong Daoist also knew about the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Ji Tianxing did not mention this matter. He nodded his head calmly and asked about the current situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Huanglong Daoist quickly answered in detail and truthfully. After listening to him, Ji Tianxing nodded his head satisfactorily and said, "If that's the case, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is on the right track and developing quickly. This is a good thing. But you can't relax yet. You have to continue to work hard and manage the affairs of the sect seriously." Huanglong Daoist quickly bowed and said, "Master, I won't forget your words for even a day. Oh right, I have something to report. Please make a decision." "What is it?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. Huanglong Daoist smiled and said, "Master, you also know that the territory of our sect has always been only a few million miles wide. In this territory there are 9 sects and 18 factions, more than 300 towns and tribes. But in recent years, our sect has been developing and growing, and our reputation is like the sun in the sky. Plus, the news that you are the reincarnation of Kenshin has also spread throughout the continent. So, I have received a lot of invitations and gifts recently. They have almost piled up into a mountain. Not only do warriors from all over the world want to join our sect, but even people from the 72 cities in the north want to join our Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Ji Tianxing suddenly frowned and asked doubtfully, 72 cities in the north? That area is north of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, close to the North Underworld Mountain. It has never been under the jurisdiction of our sect. The 72 cities have a vast territory. The number of powerhouses and population is not inferior to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. For a long time, the 72 cities have thought highly of themselves and have no dealings with us. Why would they join our sect? Huanglong Daoist quickly explained, "Master, you don't know. The 72 cities seem to be united, but in fact there are endless internal disputes. 10 years ago, the previous leader of the 72 cities died of old age. So far, a new leader has not been selected. 4 years ago, a few city lords had caused a huge commotion over a remnant piece of an ancient spell. It had almost led to a riot and a war. In recent years, the demon clan of the North Underworld Mountain has also frequently invaded, bringing great pressure to the 72 cities. So, the 72 cities are already in a mess. Many city leaders want to join us and seek protection." Ji Tianxing weighed the pros and cons and nodded. "For those warriors who come from all over the world to join our sect, you just need to strictly follow the selection process. The most important thing is to test their character. As for the people of the 72 cities, temporarily put them aside and observe their attitude. After all, the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has just stabilized. It needs to be consolidated and strengthened. Now is not the time to take over the 72 cities. A little carelessness will cause endless trouble." Huanglong Daoist understood what he meant. He quickly bowed and said, "I know what to do. Please rest assured, Master." Ji Tianxing chatted with him for a while and discussed some trivial matters. Then, he let him leave. After Huanglong Daoist left, Ji Tianxing continued to cultivate in seclusion. This time, he did not continue to cultivate the Sword Soul Dao. Instead, he comprehended the Holy Sword Body and the Stellar Sword Scripture. Once he entered the state of cultivation, he was fully focused and did not have any distractions. He even forgot the passage of time. The sun and moon rose in the east and set in the west. Day after day passed, and he sat in the secret room, motionless. His face was expressionless and his body was covered with a layer of faint silver light. Soon, half a month passed. In the morning, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation. After half a month of hard cultivation, his cultivation had become more profound and his aura was more mysterious and restrained. The realm of the second-level martial saint was already very stable. He was gradually moving towards the third-level martial saint realm. Ji Tianqing estimated that with the current cultivation speed, he would be able to reach the third-level martial saint realm in a few months. Since the morning, he sat in the secret room with his eyes closed. He did nothing and waited patiently. Because, according to the usual practice, today was the day Ji Ku sent him a message. Ji Ku had not sent him a message for 2 months. Chapter 22-25. After Ji Tianqing repelled the demon race's army, he had tried to persuade Ji Ku to return. The demon race had suffered a crushing defeat and was currently recuperating. The demon race should not be able to cause any trouble in the next few years. There was no need for Ji Ku to continue hiding in North Underworld Mountain. The situation was too dangerous. However, Ji Ku had her own thoughts and plans and had not returned. Ji Tianqing thought to himself that if he received Ji Ku's message today, he would persuade her to return no matter what. Time passed silently. Half a day passed quickly and the sun began to set in the west. Ji Tianqing sat in the secret chamber, motionless from beginning to end. Although he was worried and expectant, his breathing was not chaotic at all. This was also a kind of tempering of the mind and was very helpful for nourishing one's qi. Finally, 12 hours passed and the sky turned dark. The anticipation in Ji Tianqing's heart gradually turned into disappointment. He guessed that Ji Ku would not send a message today. There has been no news for 3 months. Could it be that Ku has encountered some trouble? Or is she in seclusion and has no time to send me a message? Ji Tianqing guessed inwardly, but he could only feel anxious. At this moment, a light purple stream of light suddenly descended from the sky. Swoosh! The stream of light rushed into the secret chamber and stopped in front of Ji Tianqing. After the purple light faded away, a black communication jade slip appeared. Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up. He quickly reached out and grabbed the jade slip, releasing his divine sense to enter it and read the message. Immediately, Ji Ku's clear and melodious voice sounded in his mind. Big Brother Tianqing, I have been in seclusion for the past 2 months and did not send you a message in time. Sorry for making you worry. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he muttered to himself, as expected, your seclusion was delayed. It's good that you are fine. Ji Ku continued, Big Brother Tianqing, in the past few months, the situation in Dark North Mountain has been rather peaceful. The demons haven't made any unusual moves. Baiming Palace and the Holy City had been rebuilt long ago, and the demon race had been recuperating all this time. It was estimated that they would not start another war for the next 10 years. The ancestral devil god was still recuperating and cultivating in the Blood Sea abyss. Great Devil Sage Ling Xian and Third Devil Sage Tatua had already recovered from their injuries and were currently taking charge of the situation. In addition to these 2 great devil saints, 2 new great devil saints had emerged in recent months. However, the 2 new demon saints are too weak to be a threat. Upon hearing this news, Ji Tianqing was greatly reassured. He thought to himself, back when Luo River was causing havoc in Baiming Palace, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo were severely injured and almost lost their lives. In just half a year's time, both of them had recovered from their injuries. The ancestral fiend god must have used some kind of secret technique to allow them to recover their strength so quickly. But in this way, both of them will be like Patriarch Xuepao, unable to make any further progress and have no hope of reaching the deity realm in their lifetime. At this time, Ji Ku said in a relaxed tone, Big Brother Tianqing, other than this, I have another piece of good news to tell you. Just a month ago, a mysterious force barged into Biming Mountain and is wreaking havoc in the southern region, carrying out a massacre. According to the information I gathered, this mysterious force is a group of strange people. There are dozens of them and they are very powerful. They are invincible in the southern region of Biming Mountain. Be it the experts of the major tribes or the 100,000 elite warriors, none of them can stop them. Currently, that force is growing stronger and stronger, but Ling Xian and Ta Tuo are helpless against it. They are busy all day and are deeply worried, hee. I really hope that those mysterious experts can kill their way to Biming Palace and get rid of Ling Xian, Ta Tuo, and the ancestral fiend god. Then, the world will be at peace. At this point, Ji Ke chuckled with anticipation. Ji Tianqing was also affected by her mood, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. That was all the information in the communication jade slip. After Ji Tianqing heard this, he used his divine sense to reply to the message in the jade slip. Cuckoo, now that the demon race has suffered great losses, they will not be able to invade Luo Shui Divine Nation for at least 10 years. They are no longer a threat. When I break through to the deity realm and try to kill the ancestral fiend god, Biming Mountain will be declared destroyed. There is not much meaning for you to continue staying in Biming Mountain. Moreover, your situation is very dangerous. Why don't you take this opportunity to leave and come back as soon as possible? If you want to go to Luo Shui Divine Nation, I will arrange for you to cultivate in Luo Shui Mountain. If you don't want to go, come to Sky Pillar Mountain to find me. In short, you have to leave Biming Mountain as soon as possible. Don't make me worry. Ji Tianqing engraved these words in the communication jade slip and was about to send it out with a wave of his hand. However, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and he took back the communication jade slip. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, Cuckoo, the group of mysterious experts you mentioned, are there 70 or 80 of them? Do they have the upper body of a human and the lower body of a lion? Do they have 4 hooves, wear black armor, and speak a strange language? After saying that, Ji Tianqing released the jade slip. Swish! The jade slip turned into a faint purple light and disappeared into the dark night. After sending out the communication jade slip, Ji Tianqing waited quietly. His eyes flashed with the light of contemplation. For some reason, when Ji Ke said that a mysterious force was causing trouble in Biming Mountain, he immediately thought of An Yu and the foreign race guard. The bad premonition in his heart became more and more intense. About a quarter of an hour later, a light purple streamer flew over from the horizon. Swish! Ji Ke's communication jade slip returned and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing opened his eyes and reached out to receive the communication jade slip. He hurriedly read the contents of the jade slip. Ji Ke's crisp voice immediately sounded in his mind. Her tone was filled with surprise. Big Brother Tianqing, you are simply too amazing. Your guess is too accurate. I just checked the information. You are absolutely right. That mysterious force indeed only has a few dozen experts. Moreover, their appearances are very strange. They are half human and half beast and wear black armor. They are very strong. Almost every one of them has the strength of a martial sage. Fortunately, they do not understand the demon race's language. Otherwise, they would have expanded their forces and taken over many cities and tribes. At this point, Ji Ke paused for a moment and asked doubtfully, Big Brother Tianqing, how do you know what those mysterious experts look like? Does this matter have anything to do with you? Is this your plan? If so, then all the more reason I cannot leave Biming Mountain. I will stay to help you gather information and monitor the movements of Ling Xian and Biming Palace. If necessary, I will also assist those mysterious experts and help them eliminate Biming Palace and the ancestor demon god. Big Brother Tianqing, don't worry. I will protect myself. The contents of the jade slip ended there. After Ji Tianqing heard it, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly replied to Ji Ke and explained the matter. Cuckoo, you misunderstood. Those mysterious experts with strange appearances have nothing to do with me. You must not provoke them. They come from the depths of the starry sky. They are foreign race experts from other worlds. They are very vicious and cruel. Simply put, they are invaders.